Hello YouTube, Yeonghwa here. It's been years since we've met, but I've returned to the webcam to bring you a subscriber special. I started this channel to document inside jokes and personal projects with no desire for fame, but one video has accumulated a bit of attention, being the full English subtitle BTS movie. I uploaded this video in March 2019, and about 3 years later we had 2,000 views. After this, viewership drastically increased to the 24,000 that we have now. I've been planning on a 100 subscriber special, but by the time I could finish writing this video, we've reached 200 and nearly 300 even, so the 100 will come later. What started purely as a passion project, the BTS movie granted me probably about 90% of our total subscribers, and I'm very thankful to each one of you, especially the day ones. I believe there is nothing more fitting for a subscriber special than a full review of BTS as a previous stan myself. Though my opinion of them has swayed for years, at their debut I was a huge fan, but I'm now sickened with what BTS has become. In this video, I'll talk about each individual BTS release from their very beginning to the ultimate nail in the coffin. In the beginning, Bangtan Sonyeondan, also known as Bang's 10 Sonyeondan, was set to train and debut with 10 members total, but many declined or were cut in auditions. We'll quickly go through these could-have-beens in no particular order. The first being 11, who declined his offer. He's remained generally unknown, but is an old friend of Rapmon, sharing the title of founding member in the rap club DNH, also known as Denouement. This group bolstered many underground names such as Iron, Keto, and Supreme Boy, but 11 eventually declined a contract with Big Hit in favor of a solo debut under Absolute Music in 2012. This would be what we consider a mid-release, and in 2016, 11 was convicted for ordering an ounce of marijuana off the dark web using Bitcoin. Regardless, 11 has remained in the game and out of prison, recently releasing his first studio album in 2019, so we'll see if he goes anywhere. Next up is Iron, a more well-known name in the indie scene from his 2014 to 15 involvement in rap game shows Show Me the Money and Unpretty Rap Star. Long before these, Iron was considered for the same reason as 11, being another founder of the DNH rap crew. However, Iron's popularity from game show singles was proven borrowed, with his 2016 debut album the very next year only making 750 sales total, a pitiful amount compared to the hundreds of thousands on his prior singles. The same year, in 2016, just like 11, Iron was convicted on marijuana charges. After getting out, he swore he'd do better, and again was convicted 2 years later for multiple counts of domestic assault. After getting out, he swore he would do better, and again was convicted 2 years later for hitting his minor roommate with a baseball bat. After this, Iron was in more trouble than with a criminal record, and though his career was practically lost in prison, he was also the type to make some sketchy enemies. In January 2021, Iron was found bleeding out in a flower bed at an apartment where he didn't live nor had any connection to anybody living there. Though he was found barely alive and taken to a hospital, he was announced dead on arrival. The courts couldn't prove any foul play, but I personally believe this was caused by making enemies with the wrong people in the underground, rather than accident. The next members considered were Keto and Atom, with Keto being another member of DNH. During their training for Big Hit, both left in favor of Stardom Entertainment's new group Top Dog. In the future, Stardom would rival Big Hit's BTS with another wild rap group titled Block B, starring an underground rapper named Zico as their leader. It's worth noting Zico collaborated with the BTS leader Rap Monster very early in their careers, and while you would expect it, Zico wasn't even in DNH. While Block B would find some success, Top Dog never exceeded 8,000 sales on any release. At the end of 2015, Keto left Top Dog, with Atom following 2 years later. In fact, so many members left Top Dog in 2017 that the group had to reform under a new name, Zeno T. The reason for these departures, according to an interview with Keto, was gripes with career mismanagement. Atom seemed to follow this, as he was forced to take a career hiatus while working on an upcoming popular game show, Produce 101, which brought many new talented producers into real stardom. After Atom took this hiatus, he would never return, eventually declining Top Dog's offer outright. The next near member is Loco, who was cut early during auditioning for Big Hit. Yet after this, he would go on to win the first season of Show Me the Money in 2012. From this grand performance, he gained rep between indie producers such as Gray and Simon Dominic, earning Loco many great features on indie hip-hop albums from 2016 to today. He's been in a slump around 2018, but I have faith he'll bring it back someday, because his features were usually decent additions. For the final members that almost made it, we have Beanzino and Basic. Anyone who knows the Korean hip-hop scene should know these names. In 2012, Beanzino dropped 2426, which is still seen as a gold standard for Korean jazz rap. Soon after, he signed with Illionaire Records alongside Daki and The Quiets. These two, with Beanzino, would destroy the K-pop trap genre in one 2014 album, 1111, then heavily committing to their solo careers thereafter. Daki really felt repercussions from going solo, but The Quiet has managed himself with a surprising talent for production. Adjacent to Beanzino, Basic shares the same fate as Loco, winning Season 4 of Show Me the Money and hanging around for some good features, but nothing too big on his own, though he's generally seen as more consistent than Loco. He's also friends with The Quiet and Simon Dominic, but most of his recognizable work is actually with Verbal Jint, who stood with San E for Basic's production team on Show Me the Money. The show's gimmick is hip-hop greats join a production duo or trio sponsoring an up-and-coming rapper contestant, which is a standard structure for most of the music game shows. Also, remember the name San E, he will be coming up again. With all that out of the way, we can get into the BTS members themselves. But first, BTS came from one man's ambitions to create an outstanding group to recapture the golden age of K-pop. This man's name is Bang Si-hyuk, Bang for short. His debut begins in '94 as a composer in college, forming a songwriting duo with his good friend Park Jin-young, the same who founded JYP Entertainment 3 years later in '97. At conception, Bang joined JYP as one of their earliest composers and arrangers. During the early 2000s, the writing duo unleashed a group on the first generation of K-pop, being G.O.D. or Groove Overdose. This first group project was a bestseller, earning Bang the title of hitmaker for his classic instrumentation. Acknowledging his own greatness, he would call himself Hitman Bang as a stage name for future production. We're just going to call him Bang. After the debut of G.O.D., they would release one album per year from '99 to 2005, then going on hiatus until 2014 and 19. What could have changed so drastically for such a great-selling group? Well, in 2005, at 32 years old, Hitman Bang founded Big Hit Entertainment. Here he would write, compose, and produce for his own artists, with his very first group being titled 88, making 3,000 sales on debut, but soon fading out. This was a relative success when looking at iron sales, so Bang was motivated to try again with more trainees. With no hard feelings between him and JYP after departing, they agreed to a joint management contract over boy group 2AM, though they would never see the same success of 2PM. More than anything, Bang was still longing for hits, like the ones So Taiji and Boys used to make. Something new to shake up the scene, revolving around hip-hop. Around this time, one of the three labels, YG, was running a group named One Time, who was topping charts with every album. One Time was going on hiatus in 2006 for the reason you don't see many adult careers in K-pop, mandatory military service for 18 months. This could split up a group with cascading ages for years, and is the explicit reason we haven't had a Big Bang album in 6 years. Bang saw an obvious gaping hole in the game and decided he would fill it for his own. He would form BTS in the image of One Time, and by 2011, his new trainees were already being featured on tracks with 2AM. But Bang would delay the BTS debut for 2 years to shift his vision away from One Time. He saw something greater than a rap group within the talents of his trainees, so he started storyboarding. Bang knew he could make true hits just like So Taiji, aimed against the strict regulations and censorship from the state that plagued his passions for so long. Bang took the reins, creating a multi-album concept for his genre-breaking group, and ensuring their debut would capture attention from both underground and mainstream audiences. Bang grew uncertain about his cards dealt from JYP, and the auditions weren't quite resulting how he'd hoped, sifting through the many eager plebs just shooting their shot. But soon, Bang was met with a king in 2010. This king was named Rap Monster, and we'll begin with his history leading to this moment. Rapmon was born an only child, eventually gaining younger siblings and a sister. As a child, he would learn English by watching the sitcom Friends with his mother. As a student, he often received awards for written poetry, which also received praise in online forums. Because of this, Rapmon considered a literary career, but decided against it. This was because at age 11 in 5th grade, Rapmon heard a single from Epic High titled Fly, and that changed his world. The song provided him so much comfort, he decided to look further into hip-hop, leading to the creation of a rap monster. Following an introduction to Eminem, who was good at the time, Rapmon's interest in lyricism grew. Originally printing lyrics he thought were cool, he began focusing on writing his own, stating his poetry became lyrics when combined with music. The same year of 2007 was the birth of Rap Monster, where he began in local amateur circles and participated in his first concert next year at age 13. His stage name was Runch Rhonda when he joined the D&H Rap Club. After a few releases with popular underground rappers such as Zico from JYP's Block B, Runch Rhonda was invited to audition for a hip-hop agency. Among the judges was a member of rap duo Untouchable named Sleepy, who had accrued tens of thousands of sales under his belt already. He scrambled his pockets for a phone, he immediately calls up Bang's lead producer P-Dog and gets Runch Rhonda an audition with Big Hit, which he passes with flying colors. With all this in mind, Rapmon's parents were strongly opposed to his music career due to his academic achievements. If you only heard that, you would think he had bad parents, but they had a very good cause. Rapmon's academic skill was scored in the top 1% of Korea in university entrance exams with subjects of language, foreign language, social studies, and math. Along this, his IQ was estimated at 148, resting 17 points above a global Mensa membership. The only way he could convince his mother was to let him join Big Hit was with one question. Would you rather have a son who's a first-rate rapper or a 5,000th place student? With promises of fame near, Rapmon was reluctantly allowed to sign with Big Hit. Originally choosing the name Rap Monster from a San-E song, he thought it was cool, but this soon turned to love-hate where he didn't really care anymore. So he renamed to RM in 2017. Rapmon gives a better face to the name, so that's how I'll reference him in this video. With Rapmon as an underground genius now under the wing, Bang launched nationwide auditions to recruit members who suited his style. The next to be found is Suga, quite soon after Rapmon. Suga would end up as the oldest Rapline member, so he had many interviews about his deeper roots. Like Rapmon, Suga's initial motivation to rap was also Epic High, standing against censorship and government bullshit. At age 13, he began writing and programming MIDI keys for production practice. During this time, the first album he'd ever buy was Eminem's debut from '96, Infinite. After this, Suga decided he would start rapping, with his first stage name as Gloss, being a double entendre translation of his birth name Yoongi. With a growing passion, Gloss would join an underground group named D-Town to bounce off other great minds, and plant roots with his earliest public performances. In these middle school days, he also picked up piano as a form of escapism and basketball as his favorite hobby, playing for his school teams as their shooting guard. Though he focused on his passions over studies, he was still able to attend and pass classes. At age 17, nearing high school graduation, Gloss picked up a part-time job in a recording studio where he would constantly practice his production and rap skill. With this new gear, he produced a song titled 518-062, the name chosen by combining 518, or May 18th, and 062, the Gwangju area code. While Gloss provides the production, the lyrics are from D-Town rapper Naxion, focused on Gwangju's uprising for pro-democracy in 1980. It's worth noting Naxion is the only member of D-Town still releasing music after the group's disbandment. The song was made for a Gwangju festival in May 2010, but according to Gloss, it was eliminated mercilessly in the first preliminary round of judging. Deciding not to completely toss it, he uploaded it online, which would technically become his first single and is still on YouTube today. In this same year, Gloss auditioned for a rap competition hosted by Big Hit named Hit It. He didn't win, but did take second place, which was enough for Big Hit to sign him as a producer and trainee. After this, his stage name would change to Suga, recalling his position as shoot guard in school basketball. Initially, Suga's condition for joining was only as a producer, being weary of idol culture and how they portray themselves. However, Bang reassured Suga that he would be placed in a group resembling One Time, and he wouldn't have to dance or anything and just focus on rapping. But Suga didn't want to be a rapper. He wanted to be a composer and seriously work. He'd been building all these skills in production for years, even studying classical composition in an attempt for acceptance to art school. Bang countered his offer by saying he would allow Suga to produce for Big Hit, but he would need to rap to be an official member and debut with his friends. With this pressure against him, Suga signed the contract, seeing it as a small compromise for a great career. At 17 years old, Suga debuted with BTS and would find himself in a mostly rapping position, with few production opportunities. Though they did exist, Suga was not mainly a producer, just a co-producer of someone else's sound, P-Dog. This led Suga to create an alias of August D, or DT Suga backwards, as homage to D-Town and releasing fully independent mixtapes with himself as executive producer. Though BTS producers are commonly featured, P-Dog. Well, BTS eventually became what Suga hated, over-appealing idol pop with the hardest dance choreography in the industry. He kept his passion alive with his own projects, garnering his love for rap music for what will be a 2-decade-strong career in 4 years. Then, the next to sign is J-Hope, whose primary passion revolves around dancing. Growing up around the same age as Suga, J-Hope would also find him in the underground culture, specifically in his hometown Gwangju. This led J-Hope to join an underground dance team named Neuron, and soon after, he began taking dance classes at the Gwangju Music Academy. From 4th grade to freshman year, he would put his blood, sweat, and tears into dance, eventually winning a national dance competition at age 14. After so much practice, J-Hope auditioned for JYP Entertainment, which stood as one of the 3 major labels. He made it through a few rounds of auditions, but was eventually cut off. After this, J-Hope knew he couldn't be discouraged and tried again for a label that was a little smaller. Showing his outstanding dance skills and sense of rhythm, Big Hit saw this potential as a rapper and signed him as a trainee. However, he nearly left Big Hit to find something else after not fitting in with the training. That was until Rapman convinced both parties that BTS needed a member like J-Hope. And afterwards, J-Hope stuck with BTS as their 3rd and final rap line member. I imagine him joking with Suga like, "This is bullshit, I wanted to be a dancer," and Suga says back, "Yeah, this is bullshit, I wanted to be a producer." And I like to think of that as a bonding moment for them. With enough rap talent in place, Bang would set his sights towards bringing in the pop style with his next auditions. Next up being Jin, whose original role was visual appeal, but eventually became a strong vocalist. He would end up as the oldest of the vocal line, surpassing Suga by 3 months. He was born in Gwacheon, a small district south of the Seoul River, with loving parents and an older brother. He lived a typical life until 15 years old, when, like Rapman, he was sent abroad to study English. This took Jin to Australia for 5 months alongside Mitchell Hope, who would become a future Disney actor. Jin's original dream was journalism, but this changed 2 years after that camp when he saw Kim Nam-gil's performance in the 2009 drama Queen Sonduk. After this, Jin decided to pursue acting. He began working on his looks during junior high, trying to be seen as cool and stylish instead of preppy and nerdy. This change was so drastic, Jin was stopped on the street by a scouting agent from major label SM Entertainment, with an offer in hand purely based on Jin's looks. Believing it was a scam, Jin rejected their offer. However, years later, during college, in the exact same fashion, he was approached by a scouting agent running off of a bus to catch up with him. This time, the agent was from Big Hit Entertainment, and knowing these guys weren't attempting to impersonate a major label, he figured their interest must be genuine. As an acting major, Jin had no experience in singing nor dancing, but Jin auditioned with his dream of acting in mind. Big Hit had other plans for Jin, so after passing, they convinced him to sign as an idol trainee. Knowing that idol groups can launch acting careers, Jin fully agreed to the terms, with his one and only life goal set on debuting as strongly as possible. He always said, as a mantra, as long as they could debut, he would be happy with anything that comes after. The next member is Jimin, technically signed as the final member. He mirrors J-Hope in that he primarily joined with a passion for dance. He was born in Busan with a mother, father, and eventually a younger brother. As a child in middle school, Jimin attended dance classes at Just Dance Academy, where he learned to, as they say, pop and lock it. After this, his passion for dance grew to such heights he would soon attend the Busan High School of Arts for the subject of contemporary dance. Here, he became a top student of the modern dance department, and one of the teachers was so impressed by Jimin's talent, he was encouraged to contact a new label that was auditioning by the name of Big Hit Entertainment. Living in Busan, Jimin had no trouble finding an audition and passed with flying colors as a genius dancer. After this, he was flown into Seoul to sign as a trainee. As the final member, Jimin's training was the shortest before their debut, which could have been an influence for Bang to delay their debut by 2 years in the first place. Originally intended to be a dancer, regardless of training, Jimin came out in the debut sounding like the only contender against Jungkook for lead vocals. Next up, we'll talk about Jungkook's story. Jungkook would be the youngest member of BTS, surpassing Jimin and V by 2 years. As typical for idol groups, this youth gave Jungkook the role of maknae, known in the business as youth appeal, which worked well alongside his personal determination to make music that the youth could relate to. His first dream was to play badminton, which is the base version of tennis. However, this dream would change after seeing a member of Big Bang and solo star of great renown G-Dragon perform a live version of Heartbreaker, one of his top solo singles and one I can personally recommend. At age 13, in his hometown Busan, Jungkook brought his passion into an audition for the 3rd season of game show Superstar K. When his audition went poorly, he was seen as a failure. Jungkook left their offices dejected, but this would not last long as the exposure he gained granted him offers from at least 7 agencies, including JYP, FNC, and Starship. Out of all these offers, he could only pick one, and Jungkook had to make it count. Not just becoming another idol, but one of worldwide renown, doing his own thing on a stage like G-Dragon. He would audition for the bigger labels, but remained undecided. That was until he finally auditioned for Big Hit. After meeting Rapman and hearing his genuine rap skills, Jungkook knew this was his best chance at forming his own Big Bang, with rap genius and writing being a key ingredient to their success. Rapman is ultimately the reason Jungkook would join Big Hit and BTS thereafter. Debuting with them at just 15 years old, while G-Dragon began his career at 13 years old, Jungkook was not far off, and his inspiration kept him dedicated to success, even transferring away from Busan to a new middle school when he became a trainee in Seoul. Around debut, Jungkook's focus for inspiration switched towards Justin Bieber, but his true roots lie with G-Dragon's style. The final member to be revealed is V, also known as Kim Taehyung, beginning his life as a farm boy with his parents in Daegu. With a personal dream to become a musician and his father's support, V began taking saxophone lessons in middle school, determined to show the world his lungs from the inside out. Soon after, he heard of an audition in Daegu from his friend and decided to tag along to support him. V didn't intend to audition at all, but one of the judges saw him and encouraged him to audition as well, which may have been based on his looks like Jin. Unsure if this was a wise decision, V called his father for advice and received encouragement to go for it. So, V auditioned on the spot, and on that day, he was the only person in Daegu to pass auditions for Big Hit. Afterwards, V joined as a trainee vocalist, and while he's always chased his own artistic visions, he's remained most thankful to his parents, brother, and sister for encouraging his passions outside of their traditional farm life. Notably after this, prior to BTS debut, V was a secret member, and deliberately kept off the record by Big Hit for a surprise factor. Nobody knew his name, so netizens nicknamed him Secret Weapon. As this secret weapon, he wasn't allowed to be included in any camera shots during most promotional events, even Jungkook's middle school graduation, and their pre-debut group vlogs where all other members are already having fun and making fans and all that kind of stuff. This took a huge emotional toll on V until he finally started recording his own videos just to have the memory of being there and proving he's not a ghost. He recalls mostly sitting by the trash can, waiting for others to finish filming. Unsure if he would even debut with BTS or if he'd be kicked out, he was eventually revealed as the 7th member. When this happened, he received a single fan letter, which made him cry with joy. He was filled with such relief that he couldn't sleep until 4 a.m., rereading the letter 15 times and pestering all the other members about it. From the shadows, V would rise as a shining star of the vocal line, capturing most of the lower notes that trainees aren't built for nor trained for. And if anything, he's earned his place at the top with BTS. After everyone was signed on and finished training, BTS would finally make their debut on June 12, 2013. With an effective promotional period from Bang, the debut Too Cool for School single album, more of an EP, would peak at top 5 in Korea's music charts, though both singles practically failed to chart. Alongside this release, BTS would perform at several live shows, and despite being unpolished in sound compared to major labels, these shows and their choreographies were shining examples of the potential in BTS. Here, we begin the album review portion, so get your popcorn or whatever. At the very start, in track 1, we get an old school scratch mix from established indie artist DJ Freeze, whose popularity comes from Planet Shiver, the trio responsible for Epic High's Remixing the Human Soul in 2009. We'll compare to Epic High quite a bit, mostly because I love them. For another comparison, this would be the only BTS track to include a featured artist for the next 5 years, until Steve Aoki shows up, with production from longtime trainee Supreme Boy, and Freeze being a scratch master on this, though only for a full minute. It really is a great first intro. After the fade out, we hear the main single, We Are Bulletproof Part 2, with Part 1 nowhere to be found. Though failing to chart, that didn't necessarily mean the song is bad, just unpopular. This song would be very telling of their core direction, and may be a remnant of Bang's desire for the one-time sound over So Taiji. The production focuses on catching your ears with high treble hats and a low 808 drumline, as was standard for trap pop in 2013. K-pop labels began steering their groups towards Western sound after Fantastic Baby and Gangnam Style proved global presence was possible, but most major labels would shy away from hip-hop besides YG. So Big Hit came with BTS to fill the niche and fully embrace it, with We Are Bulletproof Part 2's production reminding me of Jay-Z's Tom Ford, released only 2 weeks later actually. Songs like that were considered underground in Korea, yet mainstream in America. Bang knew the true energy of youthful rebellion lied in the underground, and desired to bring it to mainstream K-pop with his rap lines' unique and passionate verses. What better way to do that than copying Western trap pop? Well, this song is certainly not their best work. It was a great start, at least. Next, we have one of the only good skits from BTS, titled Circle Room Talk. For 2 minutes, we hear the BTS members talking to each other about random topics between classes. This is kind of a lore building for the universe, where Rapman shows his obsession with Epic High's Fly, and reminisces with Suga, poking fun at J-Hope for instead choosing to dance. But Jimin backs him up as the second dancer, and Suga asks V what his dream was, and V responds he played saxophone for 3 years, and he further says he stopped because his mouth hurt during practice, and everyone laughs with J-Hope poking fun at him. There's a natural back-and-forth chemistry where everyone is obviously having fun as close friends, as if they're in a school club, or you could see it as a bunch of artist friends sitting together in a studio booth excited for their debut. Though at the skit's end, they're discovered skipping class by lead producer P-Dog, who includes himself as a teacher. He scolds everyone and threatens to disband the club if they keep skipping. At a natural ending, everyone leaves for track 4. Great skit, maybe their best. Next is the second single with the same length of We Are Bulletproof Part 2, titled No More Dream. This also follows the same trap pop sound. However, they used a 90s pop rap style instead of relying on the lower ranges of vocalists, with the high treble position being filled in by guitar plucking. That's not to say it was any less powerful than the previous single, and instead of talking about how cool they are, No More Dream continues from the skit where the rap line considers what their dreams are and what they truly want in life beyond the influence of their environments. Jungkook also has a verse here, and well, I would consider him in the rap line at debut. He would rescind to the vocal line for every future album. I don't think he was bad or received hate, but a typical 7-member group would only have 1 or 2 rappers, so adding J-Hope as the third was already going over. With Bang's desire to form BTS as a rap group, he thought 4 would be fine, but when they shifted towards an idol group structure, Jungkook focused on his vocals. Along with him, Jimin also heavily worked on his vocals after this, because on every live stage, Jimin would notoriously start fucking up notes after dancing too hard. It's notable that most K-pop groups fix this by lip-syncing the whole time and just focusing on choreography, but from their first stage, BTS did everything possible to do it all live, despite the embarrassment it would bring. The novelty of hearing the real singer gave them that much more popularity, and while Jimin was fated to struggle the most being a lead vocalist and the dancer, he proved better than most idols as time went on. All that aside, No More Dream focuses on rebelling against adults who crush the dreams of youth. This track could have been the lead single, containing their whole focus of their debut. It was simple, different, and enough to make BTS some fans, remaining on Billboard's World Singles Chart for 3 weeks straight. The next interlude is just a bit of filler, with co-producer Slow Rabbit taking the reins and working with executive producer P-Dog for a short minute on a guitar melody. It's not the best and sounds a bit off tune, but it's unique and recognizable just like the prior songs. I would consider this as Slow Rabbit's theme, but it's still a track I would typically skip over. In track 6, we hear Joayo, which is a common phrase meaning I like it. This is more like it for BTS, refocusing on Seok Taiji with an R&B style chorus supporting hip-hop verses. Compared to the previous club bangers, this is meant to have a groovy, mellow sound, easily being more accessible for a K-pop audience used to Flower Boys. The poppy production style of Slow Rabbit is outstanding, but doesn't necessarily carry the members, allowing each one to shine on their own between both rap and vocal lines. Afterwards, for the outro, we get another track in the style of Circle Room Talk, titled Circle Room Cypher. This is the other contender for top skit and the best example of what a skit should be on any rap album. Running for 5 minutes long, each member, including the vocal line, is challenged to a freestyle rap verse because they're a, quote, rap group. The skill didn't matter as long as they kept it fun and genuine. They could make their own up. The vocal line is nearly making parodies, and the whole squad is laughing between verses, as if they're just kids having fun. And keep in mind, at this point, they were. With Jungkook at age 15, the oldest of the group was Suga at 20, and everyone knows you're not a real adult until you're 21. They're being fully genuine here, which is why I love it as a top-tier skit. Adding to the outro, there were 2 other tracks included on the physical edition of Too Cool for School, being Skit on the start line and Path as tracks 8 and 9 respectively. The additional skit isn't what you'd expect, with classic piano-focused production from Hitman Bang himself, and only one writer being Rapman. This demonstrates Rapman's theory of putting his poetry over music to create lyrics and shows off his conception of spoken word. Not being the hardest hitting, still only a skit, there's no doubt that Rapman's lyrical content is raw, focusing around his struggles as a trainee until debut finally arrived. The second physical edition track, Path, is an oddity from BTS, being one of their first and ever songs to list the full rap line in both writing and production credits, as Rapman and J-Hope rarely produce. This track comes back to the R&B style, shedding trap influence for a more mellow boom bap. Every member's role on the chorus is superb, and the verses here are top contenders on the album. I like to imagine the production is good, particularly from Suga's involvement, but there's really no telling with the others. It's a shame that digital owners like me never heard these 2 tracks with a style I always hoped they'd return to in the future, because this was what true groundbreaking K-pop was made of. Something new, styled like an underground supergroup album, but not exactly idol pop. Not yet, at least. For a final rating, I gave this album a 5 out of 10, but I'm bumping it up to a 6 after rehashing my opinions here. This is their very start as teens, and you can't expect them to be rapping about important stuff during these years. They still have to see the world and gain experience, but they were showing amazing promise through skill and teamwork alone. These were real artists, not the typical factory-churned idols you'd see coming out of SM, which gave BTS the little edge they needed to finally be popular with the kids, ironically, much like you'd see from Stray Kids in current day. With most of the runtime being skits and the singles not being too great, I think a 6 out of 10 is a fair rating to give, and with this in mind, let's see how they sound on their next release. With Too Cool for School being technically classified as a single album, the next release 3 months later is their first extended play titled O!RUL8, 2 ? Known as Oh Are You Late Too, which is something a student would say to another when they were both skipping class like cool kids. The direction saw no drastic changes, still keeping with the pop trap trend and focusing on rap, though this time their lyrics were aimed against struggles of proving their worth in an education system. Outselling Too Cool for School by only a difference of 5%, Oh Are You Late Too would also peak at 4th place in the Korean music charts, beating Too Cool for School by 1 spot forward. So with that bit of commercial knowledge, let's see what it really sounds like. In track 1, we get the first monologue-style intro, which becomes a recurring theme. Rapmon's English sounds pretty good compared to most other Korean rappers because he's consciously trying to mimic the hip-hop accent he knows. It doesn't sound great, but given time, RM would have better English skills than most idols. Also being the leader, his English helped immensely in early interviews. Looking back on this intro, it's nearly their most cringe, with the lyrical content being never regret anything and achieve your dreams because YOLO, with his dream being skipping class because he always gets bullied for being cringe. At this time, though, it was raw and real, considering the extent of his experience. It just doesn't hold a candle to the future. Track 2 is the lead single, another recurring theme. This track is titled No, which is apparently an acronym for no offense, but I had no idea until looking up this album. Here's the first time we see BTS focus against educators, and they want you to say no when the teacher says get back in class. They want you to know you know better, which is demonstrated by you listening to BTS. They're also against miseducation from tailored curriculums, which may align with Suga's motivation for his Gwangju Festival song. Besides that idea, what really matters is how it sounds. It's definitely power pop with a little bit of trap, but it's much weaker than I'd like. The chorus drones on where the vocal line has a lot of room to work with, but it's the bland production that keeps them restrained. It's worth noting that every song besides the outro features the rap line in writing credits, but the single is the only song to feature Bang, another recurring theme we'll see. Next we hear track 3, We On. This may be the closest to real trap that BTS have ever and will ever be, with Rapmon trying to hard carry with the deepest voice possible. Pitching Rapmon's voice around for his own backing vocals becomes another trend here. The chorus isn't bad at all, and the lyric content is hot, but Suga and J-Hope both sound like they're still tied to the pop rap influence. It could be hip-hop, but it doesn't sound like these two know standard practice in trap outside of radio, whereas Rapmon actually might. Regardless of the lacking authenticity, this stays a high-energy track while avoiding obnoxious cringe, and could have easily swapped places with No for lead single. Next up is a skit which has all the members talking to each other again. It still sounds kind of fun, but it's not the magic like the studio, as the setting is meant to be in a car at 6:30 a.m. driving away from a fan mate to see another. Everyone is tired on the mic, with Jungkook even sleeping through the whole thing. Beginning here, every skit onwards is boring and skippable. The energy captured in Too Cool for School sadly never returns as BTS reforms. However, what we do get from the next track is a hip-hop banger. Track 5 is If I Ruled the World, with the beautiful production showing true homage to old-school classic rap hits, where they could have R&B choruses without sacrificing lyrical content. This is the mo money, mo problems of BTS, and they couldn't have done it much better. Not much to say, great song. The next track, Coffee, keeps it running with a more downbeat production, but stays with the R&B chorus to rap verses. This is showing their poppy, cutesy side as if they're flower boys, but remain real rappers, almost reminiscent of Big Bang during early stuff like Haru Haru. The treble focus comes up here again with acoustic guitars, which is a trick they'd come to play out over and over, but this was still early. Still, Coffee is one of the BTS classics you'll find people claiming as their favorite. Next, we have the first real BTS cypher, beginning a series of the BTS rap line wholly focusing on proving their skills between many flows on an underground-style beat, commonly including Supreme Boy for writing. This reminds me of a Worldwide Choppers knockoff, but it's really not that bad. At this point, you should be able to guess Rapmon kills his part, and also shows much more potential for J-Hope and Suga. Each member stays pretty unique and cutthroat, and being the first in the series, this was going to take a lot to top in the sequel. After this, track 8 is titled Attack on Bangtan. We begin with V doing an alien voice, with this being the first time many fans notice he exists. We'll get to Jin later. Though usually a backing vocalist, his deep range adds to the vocals just as well as Rapmon's adds to the rap line. This track is a callback to the youthful fun they aimed for in the previous album, and though it may be unappealing, it is unapologetic. They're just having fun, which was a great quality of BTS, and I think these are the tracks that capture youthful rebellion far better than Too Cool for School's gangster fronting. The next track carries forward with the fun style in Paido Gangsan, but it's meant to be a hype track, ditching the R&B for power pop. It's pretty mid, wouldn't skip it during a full listen, but I wouldn't go straight to it. While this could have been a standout, there are definitely more memorable tracks on this EP. For the outro, Love in School, we have ditched the rap line completely, leaving it all up to P-Dog and Slow Rabbit for writing and production. The vocal line rarely writes their own material, leaving it up to the producers, but that doesn't make them untalented singers. Although we do have the whole vocal line present, their roles here aren't unique in any way, and easily interchangeable. More than anything, this track is a teaser for the next intro, and purely acts as a closer for the album here. Overall, I rated this album a 5 out of 10. It was a 4, but after a second listen, it's just not that bad, just a little worse in direction compared to Too Cool for School. There are a few really great hits here, but also some songs you would never put on a playlist or feel good about showing to friends. They're almost like inside jokes you'd only understand if you knew BTS personally, which a lot of people seem to think they do. Their second extended play would release 5 months later in February 2014, still sticking to the schoolboy concept with the title Skool Luv Affair with a capital K for cool. It was during this promotional period I first found BTS and ended up ditching my OG favorites EXO and Girls' Generation for complete favor of the Bangtan Boys. In retrospect, I'm glad I found them at this point because I would have written them off if I only heard the first 2 releases. This album takes a drastic shift towards K-pop and away from gangster fronting. But yet again, this EP would surpass the previous on the Korean charts, peaking at number 3. However, after they began the Just One Day promotions, which is how I found them, Skool Luv Affair would rise as their first number 1 charting album 2 months after initial release. They not only found success on Korean charts, but this was the first time they peaked at number 3 on the Billboard World Charts. With that out of the way, let's get into the sound. This is the first album to include outsiders for various production credits, including writers, mixers, and a few instruments. Not a huge cast, but not fully big hit, as we still see P-Dog, Supreme Boy, and Slow Rabbit all credited as main recording engineers. However, this is the first time we see a mastering engineer hired in, and by the Prophet Muhammad, Bang made it a good one. A really good one, by the name of Tony Dawsey. This man may have been the best mastering big hit ever had, and it's a shame they didn't sign him or anything, nor work with him at any point after this album ever. So, I'm going to spend a second to tell you how good Tony Dawsey was. His first breakout as a mastering engineer was in '89 with Nine Inch Nails' debut album Pretty Hate Machine. Soon after in '93 and on, he mastered KRS-One's Return of the Boom Bap, Gangstar's Hard to Earn, Big L's Lifestyles of Da Poor and Dangerous, Keith Murray's Enigma, and Jay-Z's The Blueprint, and that's just naming my personal favorites. Tony Dawsey has insane cred in the industry for hip-hop production, with decent experience in rock as well, despite being totally different genres, especially for mixing. Plus, if he enjoyed what the final mix sounds like, it's bound to have some good moments. And as such, where the previous releases had a few mixing issues, nearly every part of the production here is beautifully audible. Now, for the intro. Instead of getting Rap Monster for the intro, this time we have a whole rap line included for their best yet, showing that they can make the intro a decent song. Each member goes through a verse, describing their personal views on what true love looks like. The first verse is Suga's, with the same beat as the last EP's outro, which is what I meant by hinting at future production. After his verse, Suga and J-Hope argue, before J-Hope starts his own with a different beat, about his different view of true love focusing on fun. This beat switch is entirely unexpected, as it would never happen on a K-pop album from a major label. This was the appeal of Big Hit, being a new label avoiding invasion of the creative process and granting BTS more freedoms than other groups signed under major labels. That aside, this beat fits J-Hope's personality much better than Suga's preferred mellow production. It's as if the production is accommodating each member rather than making them write against pre-made beats. After J-Hope's verse, Rapman gives his version of True Love, which is Bangtan, and as he says, Bangtan is hip-hop. Another beat switch, the triple, follows into a newer J. Cole-style power hip-hop with horns and hard drums. This style matches Rapman's verses quite well, as he was known to sometimes write along to J. Cole instrumentals as practice. The verse is another great step up, especially from his past intros, and he comes out with nothing but the music of Bangtan in his heart. The next track is lead single Boy in Love, not to be confused nor compared with their Halsey single Boy with Love. This is arguably their first true classic single that would fit on a K-pop playlist, with the unique rock guitar mastered by Tony adding astoundingly to the chorus, though all production is from P-Dog. Bang joins again as one of the writers for only the lead single, and Supreme Boy takes J-Hope's spot for the song only. Still great writers, they sound like BTS, but they're also trying to improve and mature, following the concept of maturing through school. The verses are nice, the dance choreography rivaled that of top groups at the time. This is where we see the idol structure take place, where their positions in songs would come to match choreography, and Suga would have to commit the immoral act of dancing like a K-pop idol. Also, Rapman and Jin were noticeably uncomfortable dancing compared to the other four, but all eventually improved. In general, Suga and Rapman would ditch choreography to focus on their verses and fall back in when they finish, whereas the vocal line was expected to sing during choreography. It really is hard to keep a note when moving around like that, so I expect it's a big focus of their training. Overall, this is a hot single where the boys meet love and try to figure out what it means or how to recognize it. Turns out it can be a hard issue for young high schoolers, so many can relate to the content. Skipping P-Dog's solo skit, we're given a series of tracks that relatively follow the last album's structure. However, the vocal line has much more agency to separate from the production and reach outside of bland chorus notes. This does make the chorus drag a bit, but the chorus is what makes these bangers, so I'd rather extend that than insert a filler rap verse. Track 4 is titled Where You From, with two new outsiders, Kwon Dae-hee and Cream, as the producers. They're also in the writing credits, but accompanied by the rap line. This is a cutesy bop that's even more K-pop than the last song, but where the rap verses may fall a little bland, the vocal line's choruses make this a killer with their extension at the end. Next up, we have the second shining star of a single titled Just One Day at track 5. This is my personal favorite from the album, and one of the most memorable choreographies by virtue of every member using a chair. It was certainly unsafe, especially for some of the live shows, but the boys were willing to take the risk for a unique idea that wasn't just giving each member a mic stand to dance with. Besides that, the sound itself is a bit more downbeat, with the vocal line killing the ranges the whole way through. Added with the rap lines, mellow hip-hop style blending superbly with backing from the vocal line. V's hitting some crazy low notes compared to Jungkook and Jimin serenading the highs, The vocal line doesn't carry the rap line, neither rap to vocals, but working together the whole way through. If anything, BTS is getting carried by P-Dog for production and Tony Dawsey for mastering. These two facilitated BTS to make this song, expressing their artistry in such a full manner, but still as a team, which is really what boy bands are about. After this, we hear track 6 titled Tomorrow. This is quite a shift in production, as instead of P-Dog, we get Slow Rabbit and Suga. It's really a decent beat for something like Woke Rap, which was essentially BTS as a sapling, but you could write it off as pop rap for their usage of auto-tune and vocal filtering. The lyrical content is where the song shines, as the rap line is still as raw as ever with their feelings and hopes for tomorrow. I could see some people liking this a lot, but the chorus makes it not for me personally. Still a decent song, might fit on a playlist, but I would probably skip it for the next track. Next, being BTS Cypher Part 2 Triptych. Do you know what a triptych is? If we're not going by the altarpiece definition, a triptych is a set of 3 associated artistic, literary, or musical works intended to be appreciated together. So you're supposed to take it as a collage of independent verses strung together, which follows the same structure as the last, being worldwide choppers. This track has Supreme Boy alone for production, joining the rap line for writing. The second cipher is an even greater display of rap skill, with a few more beat changes that feel worse than the intro by impeding the flow between verses, but the beats aren't too bad once you get into them. J-Hope and Rapmon show the most improvement here, especially with Rapmon's English bars. The main appeal to this track is the unique flows that are hard to find outside of underground Korea, where the rhyme schemes are a whole different game than English, akin to UK drill artists. But here, the rap line is doing them in a K-pop group and making it appealing, like Mad Lads truly breaking their societal norms. Next track, we bring back the vocal line for title Spinebreaker. This includes producer P-Dog returning from lunch, where he's joined by outsider Owo. Both are also writing with Slow Rabbit and Supreme Boy and the rap line, just to get that extra big hit representation. It's a very Oompa Loompa song, but very brooding when trying to be hype. The lyrical content revolves around youth keeping their parents in poverty with their own desire for vanity and always wanting more until their parents' spine breaks from being overworked. Even the high note vocalists keep their tones dark enough to match the rap, but V's deep range is what carries the chorus for this song. I'm not a fan of the Oompa Loompa that Owo seems to be adding here, but some people might prefer this over Tomorrow. Next up, we have Jump, which remains hype but sheds the brooding for an upbeat electro style. This is all BTS with P-Dog, Supreme Boy, and Suga on production. It's meant to be the fun track for fans who enjoyed the last ones. You know it's a fun one when even the vocal line raps through their choruses. Though this song is filled with so many synths and tempo shifts, it almost feels like 100 Gex production. Regardless of their disorganization, BTS stays on beat and makes it a half-decent track. This is one where if you didn't like the direction before, you won't like it on this album, but there are some fans who truly enjoy these fun songs from BTS, above all the serious, mellow pop rap stuff. It's all about preference, and I personally prefer this track over Tomorrow and Spinebreaker, purely for the content. Since this isn't a full-length album, we're left at track 10 for the outro. While BTS learned how to make intros sound good, they have not figured out the outros, again leaving it all up to Slow Rabbit for production and writing alongside P-Dog. Here, the vocal line says they're going to give it to you, it being their love, and they want to give you their love. It's extremely bland and simple, and unlike the last intro, this makes no reference to any sound for the next album. Overall, I rated this EP at a 6 out of 10. Certainly a step up from Or You Late 2, and nearly a delivery on the initial promise they had in Too Cool for School. While it is a great step up, what keeps it below a 7 is the inexperience of the crew and artists. There are some real cringe tracks here, but BTS is certainly trying to cultivate a new sound while staying unique as themselves. To make this much progress in 8 months since Or You Late 2, BTS showed me they could see where they needed improving, and really worked on it. As if the members actually listen to their own recordings and try to pick it apart for flaws, constantly criticizing their performance so they can do it better next time. I personally liked the shift towards self-positive messaging instead of the relentless anger at higher institutions, because the way they constantly question themselves in lyrics felt like they at least can practice what they're preaching. Whereas throwing stones at giants means far less when you're technically working for one, being Bang Big Hitmaker. Our next album arrived 6 months later, and yes, a real album, their first studio official debut. One moment. This first debut album is titled Dark&WILD. With teaser promotions for lead single Danger, they would surpass the success of Just One Day, and BTS began hitting the mainstream. These teaser trailers were something different, as each one used a stripped-back production of the actual song. This led to some fans speculating where their production style would go next, but it was a community mystery until release. This caused a lot of build-up, but in the end, the final mix came very close to Boy in Love. Regardless, this had much more appeal than their previous attempts for teasers, and only grew with their newfound popularity as up-and-comers. This was the formative era of BTS stans coming out of the woodworks with mass obsessions over anything they posted next, whether on big hit accounts, personal accounts, the Bangtanbam group vlogs. This was all thanks to their Skool Luv Affair's number 3 position on the Billboard World Chart. Speaking of charts, in terms of Korea, Dark&WILD debuted at one position higher yet again, reaching a peak of number 2. With 14 tracks on this thing, I'll try to keep it simple and short. We already know what BTS wanted to be, but Dark&WILD told of what they would become. The intro, titled What Am I to You, is their most classic yet, and I'm a sucker for the strings. It is a Rapmon solo, and again, gets away with a 3-tier beat switch. Starts off cheery and grand with trumpets, but the strings are what allow to a darker progression in the second beat, and if I remember correctly, the third beat gives power to that dark with low synths and high strings. It's pretty good, not an eternal banger, but the classical composition brings it very close. It's at least the best intro yet, and one that could easily fit to a playlist, if you're feeling pretty down. Next, of course, is the lead single, being Danger. The song itself turned out to be a classic example of how BTS could make the dark style upbeat, playing to the title of Dark&WILD. Each vocalist is trying to bring a powerful style to the chorus, which ironically ends up sounding like R&B anyways. This structure, between verses to catchy chorus, is the tried and true from Big Hit, which is what makes it a classic example for BTS. Absolutely their most playlistable single yet, this kept their fans well fed regardless of the rest of the album. Next, we get the second single, War of Hormone, which would have later promotions like Just One Day. This was pretty good the first 5 times I heard it, and the choreography is hot, but wow, it gets old being this flagrant. Maybe not when you're this young, but I am not a fan of bragging for the sake of it. Supreme Boy is a writer here, and while I might not agree with the content, the overall sound is pretty fun and upbeat with decent vocal performances. At track 4, we hear Hip Hop File, which is nearly a callback to paying homages in If I Ruled the World. With the R&B chorus showing up, instead of using hip-hop style, the rappers stick to pop rap, allowing the track to properly breathe for the chorus. Although not devoid of hip-hop, this is a song where Rapmon and J-Hope list off their many influences, and Suga reminisces on his ambitions as a writer in Daegu. Everyone's flexing their knowledge of the scene with no bad influences to be found. Rapmon shouts out Dre, Black Star, Rakim, and Pete Rock, while J-Hope shouts out dynamic duo, Epic High, Nas and Kendrick. Overall, it's a deep song, but the chorus can make it old after a while. Track 5 is Let Me Know, which I believe was released early along with the next track. It is a slow song with spacey electropop style, lots of treble between the huge booms which allow the vocals to use more range than sing high forever to fill out our empty production please. This is a trend for BTS over almost any album, and a major reason why so many people are polarized for or against them. Let Me Know sheds most of the hip-hop influence to keep it strictly pop. Next is Rain, which has another production bias of mine with the piano. This is the first production with Slow Rabbit instead of P-Dog, and unexpectedly, this is a killer compared to most of the other tracks. The sound is barely wild, besides Suga's verse remaining dark and overall sad, but the rap line sounds so genuinely sad. If they were more hype, this would have been a great replacement for Hip Hop File. The verse styles work great with an R&B chorus since they can both be sad together. Overall, this is a top track. After this, we keep it rappy with BTS Cypher Part 3 and Supreme Boy writing as well as taking full production. This is a real piece of history as Supreme Boy is finally allowed to join and perform the hook. The rest of the rap line has even further improved and are starting to sound like real writers through practice. Instead of being fully dark and moody like the last track, this one is truly dark and wild, with their most authentic attempt of pop trap so far. Next is an interlude which is purely a lead-in to the next song at track 9, titled Could You Turn Off Your Cell Phone? This is a classic example of what could have been an alternative R&B hit song, but since they need the rappers, we get filler verses. The chorus here is killer, especially with the extension towards the end, but the wild pop rap needs carried so hard to make the song work. If they removed the verses and just let the beat play, this would be so much better, but it's a masochistic piece of work to get through the verses just for that sweet chorus. After this, we hear track 10, Blanket Kick, and Hitman Bang joins production for this one. Much more mellow sound, focused on guitar, still dark but not wild or sad, more somber and reminiscent of Skool Luv Affair. The content focuses on feeling frustrated about their past while trying to sleep, hence kicking the blanket. Not a classic, not the worst, but it's a decent addition to the album compared to another interlude. Next up is 24/7 Heaven, which is an obvious fun song which sheds the dark besides the deep monotone 808 drum. The overall production is tight and boppy like a K-pop summer playlist song, though the members don't exactly fit the niche. They sound much more unnatural than their previous fun tracks, and typically, this is a skip for me. Afterwards is track 12, Look Here. This track attempts at the same thing, but instead of getting the real production, we're met with a guitar that can only play 2 chords. This comes off as more filler than an interlude, and I'd almost rather have one here. If this weren't the worst song on the album, it would be 24/7 Heaven. Next up, at track 13, we hear Second Grade, which is much more palatable because at least they're trying to sound like second graders, instead of doing it accidentally. The production stays fun, upbeat trap with their classic gunfire soundbite. This is more of a meta reference to we've been in K-pop for 2 years, so we're second graders now, you have to treat us like big kids. Though this song does work much more naturally with the rap and vocal lines, it's not the worst, just kinda bad. The outro here is a saving grace, being their best yet. Instead of making it a whack song on purpose, they fully develop it out. The progression on the vocals into a pitched down hook, then rebuilding it from the low point by blending their independent vocalist ranges, makes it a real beautiful production compared to the fodder they used to have. Instead, we just sacrifice the last 3 tracks for a banger outro, and it's worth it in my opinion, for the sake of playlisters everywhere. Overall, this album gets a 6 out of 10. It would be a 7 without the filler, but I can never get those 12 minutes back, and it's there forever. Just like Skool Luv Affair, there are some really great songs here, but the concept falls off later on when the track styles default back to their guns. Also in comparison, just like you won't forget Skool Luv Affair if you're not a fan of Skool or Love Affairs, you won't like Dark&WILD if you're not a fan of dark and or wild songs. I used to be a fan of both, but now I'm lost on the wild, yet still appreciate the return to dark influence here. Though soon, BTS would ditch the darkness and embrace their flower boyism, finally outside of school. The next series is named Hwayang Yeonghwa. Now begins the golden era of BTS. 8 months later, right on schedule, their next EP released, titled The Most Beautiful Moment in Life Part 1. As third graders now, they've had a lot more experience around the K-pop scene, be it for making industry friends or performing dozens of live shows. The album consists of less rebellion and more coming of age after high school graduation. We leave the schoolyard for exploring the world beyond between forests and oceans. However, in shedding that rebellion, we see BTS shift even further away from hip-hop and completely dive into K-pop as idols. Typically, in underground scenes, idols are seen as a scourge where people would rather find their own identities than embody rich stars and advertising deals. With even Suga following this idea, BTS would still attempt to capture idol culture, but in a different way. Instead of saying whatever the top stars are saying, each member comes with their own idea of what it means to be an idol in a different definition. Typically, this is synonymous with being a role model, so what advice would they tell others who come into their role? This is their first release to widely include the vocal line as writers instead of leaving those parts up to P-Dog. Now, P-Dog can focus more on production, still joined with Slow Rabbit and Suga, with even Jungkook in the outro. Hitman Bang only shows up for skit production and, of course, writing for both singles. Along with the vocalist writing, the songs place heavier emphasis on storytelling, focusing around short films released prior to the album. The videos are gorgeous, but I always had a hard time finding translations or subtitles as I followed along, so I wrote a huge script for a compilation with my own reinterpreted subtitles as a passion project and uploaded it years ago for my own archiving. You probably already know that's the reason I'm making this video, but I will leave a link to that one in the description. This is the last time I'll talk about commercial success until the fall, because even just part 1 of this EP series was enough to break the records of full album Dark&WILD. Out of 9 songs on this EP, 6 of them would reach the top 25 on Billboard's World Songs chart. Of course, the full EP reached number 1 peak on Korean charts, showing their first breach into Belgium charts, and reached number 1 on the Billboard US Indie Albums chart, with World Albums and Top Heartseekers from Billboard following at 2 and 6 respectively. On 5/15/2015, BTS won their first music show on SBS MTV for the lead single I Need You, and they'd go on to win 4 additional awards with the same song. I could read out these numbers, but to put it into perspective, the music video for I Need You reached 1 million views in 16 hours, and the secondary single, Dope, did the same in nearly 15 hours. Because of this trending status and YouTube's React meta standing strong, a huge global audience would find BTS through channels such as Fine Bros, Don't Find Me. Through their popularity, Dope's viewership grew until it became the first music video from BTS to surpass 100 million views. This was an enormous moment in K-pop history, for 100 million views was previously only possible between the big 3 entertainment agencies, SM, YG, and JYP. This is why the EP begins a golden age, not only for BTS, but other aspiring indie artists who see a possibility to shun the labels and their strict censorships. Getting over all that, for the last time I promise, we can get into the real music. The intro isn't as grand of an entrance as Dark&WILD, but still hits in a real hip-hop way. Instead of Rapmon, we get Suga, and instead of P-Dog, it's Slow Rabbit, with both being writers and producers. I don't know how to describe it other than a basketball-type beat, but it's very fitting for Suga's style. In my opinion, this is the best he sounded so far, rivaling Rapmon's mastery of their language. Definitely an outstanding intro that proves improvement, but I wouldn't prefer it over Dark&WILD. Of course, next up is the lead single, I Need You, which acts as their first storytelling video. Each member deals with a personal drama which heavily impacts their lives outside of school and in the bigger world. Even if school is over, they're still able to meet up, but instead of being Dark&WILD over Skool Luv Affairs, they're searching for the meaning of their reactions to love. K-pop songs really love talking about love because the words sound good, regardless of content, and foreign audiences love familiarity. In reality, this song shows everyone being down bad and really going through it right now. The content is depressing, but average foreign listeners don't listen for the words, so lyrics are still structured for their Korean stan audience. Between capturing both of these groups, I Need You was their best attempt at a worldwide hit with a near bullseye, capturing the airwaves of households from Korea to the other side of the world. However, The success of this track would ultimately solidify Big Hit's decision to turn BTS away from hip-hop and focus on mass appeal to build profits, as capitalists should act in their best interest. Obviously, the production is top-notch, and the vocal line sounds a bit more mature, making this a great hit of a song, although it's depressing. At track 3, we have Hold Me Tight. Bringing back the spacey sound for a slow rabbit pop trap production, the vocal line again feels a bit lost in the chorus. Slow Rabbit's style seems to work mostly for the rap line, and he'd likely rather have rappers and synths instead of vocalists. Though the deepest content here that each rapper can find boils down to, "This is why I want you to hug me." I'm not sure if we're yet at the trend of putting album fodder after lead singles, but this is a great example. This production could have been so much more, but it feels as though they chose a song title and made lyrics around it just for a little filler. You're not supposed to have a track this week at number 3, so let's see where number 5 stands after Hitman Bang's cool skit. At track 5, we get the second single, Dope. This received far more attention than I Need You, because instead of going full K-pop, BTS is allowed to show off their new skills between vocals and rappers in a hype environment. They show their typical pop trap structure, but the unique instrumentation from P-Dog and his experience with refining the BTS hype style are what made this track a hitter from the chorus. Next up, we have Boys with Fun, aka Hwangtan Sonyeondan. This is a decent fun song, as instead of their typical wacky moves, they try to keep it primarily on groove. These songs aren't exactly true displays of skill and act as mainly filler after singles, so I don't give it too much credit, but this is very good compared to the previous fun tracks. If it weren't for the next track, I would never think of fast-forwarding the CD. But unfortunately, at track 7, we have Converse High, which is the only song on this album I still listen to. What a banger. The grooviness from the fun track carries over here, but they also bring back the R&B chorus to rap line structure. However, it doesn't exactly sound like an R&B chorus anymore. It sounds more like a BTS chorus. Each member plays shining roles through the mix on here, and even I would put this on my summer playlist. The content is about a girl who wears red Converse, being Rapmon's ideal type, and we all know pop fans love to name brands. Actually, in order to perform live shows of this song, BTS had to censor any mention of name brands to prevent broadcasting bans. Converse High, in live shows, became Lover's High, and at the start of Rapmon's verse, where he says, "F your Chanel, Alexander McQueen's, and Raf Simons," it was edited to say, "F your man, your woman, and your everything." Regardless of ruthless censorship, I'm glad they were still able to perform this because it was really a hit. Next, we have track 8, Moving On. The rap line continues killing it on an old style, being the mellow slow jam with a vocal line who's about to start crying on the mic. It's a really nostalgic song about moving away from their first group apartment as trainees. Overall, it does suffer the same lost vocals as Hold Me Tight, but this sticks with the classic rap line writers and P-Dog producing, so it's not Slow Rabbit's fault. At the very least, this is a decent lead-in for the outro, but the feelings on this track are going to be as subjective as Hold Me Tight. Finally is the outro, titled Love Is Not Over. In the future, BTS released an extended mix of this track, so I'll save my final views for that one. However, this is nearly an exact copy of DARK&WILD's outro, and matches it as another banger from the album. When I mentioned earlier that 6 of the 9 tracks from this EP charted globally, that includes this outro. I bet in retrospect, they wish they could have done this outro on Skool Luv Affair, but they just didn't have the experience at the time. Overall, I rated this EP a 7 out of 10. They found great sound on the majority of tracks, didn't use too much filler, and really began their careers as serious pop artists instead of retaining the image of wildcard boys like their rivals Block B. BTS took the schoolboy concept and continued running it even further, acknowledging that time doesn't stand still in real life. You can't be this crazy, wild youth forever, and eventually you'll seek some kind of order to find answers that truly matter. The length of 9 songs makes rating out of 10 slightly unfair, but Yeonghwa Part 1 is still technically double the length of Too Cool for School when accounting for skits. There's some misses, some bangers, but All in all, this shows a better direction for the group as a whole, and more promise than any previous release. The next EP, of course, is Hwayang Part 2, another 7 months later. This was my favorite album art from them ever, so you know I had this one on pre-order. This album obviously continues the previous concept in bonding through individual dramas. Skipping the commercial success, we'll get right into the sound. At the intro, Suga is still rapping about how he doesn't give a shit and doesn't give a fuck about haters, claiming it's better to never mind them so they never mind him. Of course, as a 2015 pop rapper, you have a lot of haters you have to prove wrong. The content is slightly pretentious, which is typical for Suga, but he does sound a bit worse than the first intro on this by ditching the hip-hop. Though this is to be blamed on Slow Rabbit's production and writing rather than Suga's, as he's only a writer in this song along with the other rappers. Definitely a learning experience to have someone other than Rapmon try a solo, and at least it's pretty short. Next up is the lead single, Run, which is my personal favorite from the entire Golden Era. This might as well be P-Dog's Golden Era too, because the production on this is top tier and very suited for specifically BTS. Although it is an electropop chart hitter with the Hitman Bang writing, granted Bang is a writer on every single, this feels uniquely BTS, with even V and Jungkook joining the whole rap line for writing as well. If I had a BTS playlist of best songs, well, I Need You might not make it. There is no way I am missing Run. The rap line is finally working with the vocal high notes by raising their own, and all vocalists are killing it on here, with only Jin slacking very lightly at the end. Next in track 3, titled Butterfly, we don't get fodder after a single. This is a real ballad song compared to their half attempts in the past. I believe this success was found through Brother Sue in the writing credits. He first showed up in part 1 for writing an I Need You, but was brought back for this track, the next, and the outro for part 2. In my opinion, these are all some of the best pop hits to come from BTS, and I wish it would last. Butterfly shows the vocal line's best skills yet, with the acoustic guitar we haven't seen in a while. Still being a P-Dog production, the electropop influence remains, but now he knows a lot of tricks to keep it mellow and not force it into upbeat. This is a real easy listen for me, and the type of pop I'd like to hear more of from Western artists. The next track, Walian 52, comes back to the signature style of rap line with R&B, but instead of R&B, it's BTS. Feels lighter on the production than their past attempts, with that high-pitched sample staying all through the track. So if you don't like it, you're gonna skip to the next. If you do like it, great, because this song is pretty decent in terms of performances. Sticking with a real pop sound, though not like Run or Butterfly, I could see this being listened to and playlisted instead of treated like fodder. By the grace of Big Hit, we're finally getting less filler on projects, although it is idol pop. Next on track 5, we have Ma City, which is a total forgotten banger from the rap line. This holds much more punch than the past attempts at being groovy, because instead of making it a love song, this is a fun one. The rap line is still popping off, with even the vocal line joining them for this one. The production is way above their other fun style songs, and with everyone sounding great, this is much easier to listen to than any past attempt, really. I would rarely skip this song, and I consider it a classic of BTS. Track 6 is Silver Spoon, commonly known as Bepse. This is a Dead Ringer mix of Spinebreaker on a trap beat. Overall same concept, but with a matured sound, and for that I'd argue this is a bit better by production alone. This track showed a side of BTS other than radio pop, almost like a Cypher Part 4, and it gained them a ton of popularity in live shows compared to Spinebreaker, where BTS already had the premise of being a not idol group. With Bepse, although containing the same lyrical focus, they've just flipped the audience, and idol pop fans are more likely to enjoy rap than rap fans enjoying idol pop. Next is a skit where they realized we actually have to try to have fun, but then they made it their longest one yet. There are no writers and 3 producers, without Suga included. Overall, not cool. Afterwards is Autumn Leaves, which goes underappreciated by far. This is the best BTS has sounded in terms of spacey electropop, and the backing vocals with all their tuning and effects still remain tasteful to the end. The rappers are allowed to be softer between the loud harmonic chorus, and this lends to great chemistry between all aspects here. Though I will say the song runs just a bit too long, it's definitely still another pop hit for the chart from BTS. Next is the outro titled House of Cards, which takes the production into a totally different direction. This is towards the swing jazz pop trend, which gained a major resurgence in Korea following EU's Modern Times in 2013, widely regarded as revitalizing jazz pop in their music scene. However, BTS has chosen to take a slower sound, something you'd find as the credits roll on a James Bond movie. Regardless, I'm very biased towards this genre, which makes the outro outshine all others in my eyes. House of Cards shows how capable BTS really is of making songs relatable to classic hits, instead of always appealing to chart toppers. Overall, with another 9 tracks, I gave this EP an 8 out of 10 for superb sound. They are still uniquely BTS, but sound much more refined as pop artists instead of rebellious youth fucking around in classrooms. This EP alone holds most of their best songs from a pop hit perspective, and we will soon see just how bad it gets. 6 months later, and still riding off hits from the previous 2 albums, the next BTS release would conclude Hwayang Yeonghwa, titled Young Forever. This is their first compilation in 2 years, with the first being Too Cool for School and Or You Late 2 combining. But now that they had the numbers, Young Forever would reach a #1 chart position. This was thanks to not only being a compilation, but also hosting 3 new singles, which would simultaneously reach #1, 2, and 3 on the charts for the first time in K-pop history. One of these singles, Fire, would not only find a #1 on normal Korean charts, but also every major K-pop chart. I'll show you a better image so you get a better picture. Back then, this was known as a perfect all-kill, or PAK, a term popularized by the song Nagging, made by IU for a variety show in 2010, seeing similar performance. I'll remind you though, chart toppers are not necessarily always great, they're just popular. As of now, in 2022, IU still holds the record for most PAK songs at 21 total, but the single song to hold the most hourly specific charts at once is none other than the rotten core of BTS, Denouement, holding 610 PAKs. Besides the History Channel tangent, there's some other tracks on here that are just remixes, but I'm including them and trying to avoid repeats because there's some really good ones on here. With that, we'll begin the singles. The first single was released on April 19th, 2016, titled Epilogue Young Forever. This is a real banger in production from Slow Rabbit, and we actually see RM with him instead of Suga. Rap line writers, Hitman Bang, there's nothing new but the ability of the vocal line to keep rhythm, and the rap line is practically singing with them, focusing on their notes instead of stressing over flow. This is a real good pop song that captures a lot of the best qualities in BTS, and it's no wonder they would put it at the outro for disc 1. The second single, released almost 2 weeks later, is titled Fire. On disc 1, this track comes directly after Dope. Fire is a whole attempt at recapturing Dope, but instead of having a groove to it, we get the club banger version with a more intensive dance pop. Surprisingly, for a single, this is a P-Dog solo production, and he's staying catchy but with those big synthesizers. But of course, the mixing was handed off to none other than James F. Reynolds, who will come up near the end as well. This was a well-deserved success for BTS, earning 3 first-place trophies from music programs and retaining their reign in K-pop after a slight hiatus. The third and final single is titled Save Me, which is the first shit show for BTS in the years to come. Yes, it was a hit single, and it's still a nice playlist song, but this was Big Hit's first slip-up. In the beginning, BTS was a group sheerly focused on debuting, and no matter what numbers they had out, at least they had careers doing what they love. Compared to this, BTS became a group where they found massive chart-topping success, which put the pressure on to be a top idol group instead of just being another idol group. Bang would no longer settle for tracks that weren't hits, and saw anything else as wasted time where Big Hit could have overtaken the other big 3 labels. Well, BTS found renown and glory from their success. Hitman Bang found money with little recognition. Bang wanted an accomplishment of his own to achieve, for his name to be written in the stars, and the most fitting goal was rising above the rival labels who doubted him. And so, for this track Save Me, Bang introduced outsiders for writing. Not one, not two, but three. At least the rap line is still here, but the vocal line apparently can't write their own. Let's take a look at the three writers' credentials for any other pop hits. First is Ray Michael John Jr., beginning his writing work in 2011 on Pixie Lot's song Birthday, next in 2012 on Connor Maynard's Just In Case, and 4 years later he came to BTS for Save Me, staying another year for single Best of Me, and then next year writing for Ashniko's Blow with Not Much Sense. Next is Ashton Foster, beginning her writing work in 2011 on Pixie Lot's song Birthday, next in 2012 on Connor Maynard's Just In Case. 4 years later, she came to BTS for Save Me, staying another year for single Best of Me, and then next year writing for Ashniko's Blow with Not Much Sense. Finally, we have Samantha Harper with absolutely zero prior credits unless this is the side actor from Mork and Mindy. Knowing this, it is no wonder why it felt like the beginning of the end. These writers had zero credentials under their belt and would be known in the industry as inexperienced at best. When Dark&WILD started including a few featured writers, the key was few, just to have something new and not take over the sound. There was no reason to throw 3 random people on here for credits when actual BTS vocalists have a much better track record in writing. The whole vocal line is being shunned out of writing because they don't understand what's in a good chorus, but the rap line can always write their own because it's just rapping. Big Hit is beginning to focus on Frankensteining pop hits for BTS with this song, and they really don't need the surgery. BTS was fine when they were uniquely themselves, and that was a huge early appeal, but they would lose it during the next album series. Before that, we have to get to the Young Forever remixes. We'll start with the outros, the first being from Part 2, House of Cards full-length edition. Even being full-length, it still stays under 4 minutes. This is one of the weaker remixes, as it only adds a few more sections for the vocal line to hit the same notes, but at least it adds another chorus, which makes this preferable to the original outro's length. The second outro remix follows suit from Part 1, Love Is Not Over full-length edition. I highly prefer this version for the rap line's verses, and the vocal line's extension goes about the same way, but I prefer this quite a bit more. This would have been one of their best outros if it were actually used in an album. After the outros, we have the singles remixes. There are 2 for each song, so keep that in mind. We'll start with I Need You in the urban mix. This is highly preferred for me, as it swaps out the electropop for a split second in time to try a more blues pop. It would be a full R&B song, but it's so much softer with a slight jazz influence. By now, I miss this style from BTS, and I'm just glad they saw the value of the sound, because this is more of a hitter than their standard 2015 pop production. I Need You's second remix is just a plain remix, and it's really lazy. Like, someone hit the reverb and said pitch it higher until it sounds like a remix. Granted, the production is entirely different, it's more so for novelty. There's only one producer, and his name is Sean. His past work is composing for mainly EXO, and during this remix, he was closely tied with Epic High for instruments on their new album, We've Done Something Wonderful. However, Sean's solo success came in 2010 as a backing vocal keyboardist from post-punk revival band The Cocks in their debut album, Enter, containing song A Full Moon Night. Play it. This is a classic in the Osu Mania community, and how Cox is mostly known by Virtue. Maybe not for the synthesizer, but it's funny to see how Sean started out and now he's remixing BTS. The remix is just so bad, I figured I'd tell you the producer's history since it would contain more substance. Carrying on, we have the Run remixes, beginning with the Run Ballad mix. This was one I'd been waiting on for months, and was the only one used for the teasers. Like Danger's teaser mix, I figured it would never see a full-length remix, but I prayed to Big Hitman Bang to release it. I remember someone, maybe a member, leaked an early demo of this remix on a live stream around the time of Part 2's release. I found this track uploaded on SoundCloud, which sounded like it was recorded through a phone 8 feet from a webcam microphone at like 128 kilobits. It was pretty bad, but it was enough, so I downloaded that version and listened to it on the bus to school at least 100 times. That was until this official version dropped in high quality with a few extra sections, and this was just as good as the demo. This remix delivers so much it outperforms the original on most fronts, although being much more stripped back on production. This is all Slow Rabbit, and it's his best work by far. Though the original is great, the ballad mix brings so much more merit to the artist, and for me personally, this is the BTS pop sound at their highest peak. The other mix for Run is the alternative mix, which brings back the classic BTS style electropop with another scroll through the sound library. I do prefer the original compared to this mix, but since this had P-Dog, it's not nearly as bad as that I Need You remix with Sean. I could see people preferring this, but it's not my type of BTS. Finally, we have 2 remixes for Butterfly, the first being the Prologue remix. This is an extended mix we heard in their first short film of the series titled Prologue. I much prefer this to the original, though it does run a bit long at nearly 5 minutes. The sound is almost like an acoustic version, but it keeps the overall tone of the original. If I'm listening to Butterfly, I can deal with an extra minute for a better mix. The second is the alternative remix, which brings back the electropop influence. However, this sound was much more lacking in the original, being already a slightly acoustic track. This doesn't particularly stand out, but it's still good if you prefer the harder production style over soft. Overall, I gave this compilation an 8 out of 10. Although there are a few falters in the remixes, the others are full-out hits, and the track listing is practically ensuring a safe album for BTS. They found their pinnacle of success between the singles on this, but the whole album is practically made for radio. There's not much experimental about Young Forever, but the sound it attempts is done authentically, showing true mastery as pop stars. The sales from this rivaled past releases, which gave BTS more than enough funding for their next films and concept album. Fuck. It's not Wings. But it actually is a Persona. We're gonna... I will not lie to you, YouTube. I did not find the Wings album. Beats me, because it is my favorite one. But ironically, I found my copy of Persona down there, and we'll get into this one. But let's focus on Wings for now. So 5 months later, after a build-up of short films that kept the audience captivated for the next release, the album titled Wings drops. This is an ode to spreading wings and flying from their dramas presented in Hwayang. Wings is also nearly a complete branch away from idol pop, with a total of 15 tracks, 18 in the reissue, and 7 in a row being solos from each individual member. This is the final time we'll see the Hwayang series, and acts as a true beginning of the end. Still, Wings had nearly 500,000 copies on pre-order in the first week, with the reissue getting 700,000, breaking the highest pre-order record for the first half of 2017. Still, breaking records, all that, it's not the decline just yet. You may want to take a quick break here, because this album will take the longest to cover. If you do pause, either put me in your watch later, or like and subscribe so you don't forget to come back. Welcome back. Let's get into the sound. For the intro, we don't have Suga and we don't have Rapman, but it's actually J-Hope's time, though Rapman is credited in writing with him. This is a standard BTS intro setting the tone for the album, which is meant to be darker, not dark and wild, but more dark and evil, I guess. It explores mental health and resolving their dramas presented in their school days. This is a pretty decent intro, but it gets old after about 10 listens. Though the production is more progressive than P-Dog's standard, his newest influence sounds somewhere between Pitbull's Tropical Dance and DJ Swivel's Chainsmokers work. Next is the lead single and only single, titled Blood, Sweat, Tears. This track still has the classic lineup with P-Dog producing, Rapline and Bang writing, with one outsider for writing named Kim Do-hoon. He is the main producer of classic girl group Mamamoo, who's had much more experience in the tropical house style. Being a club-based dance song, this is the first single from BTS I would not put on a playlist. Not even the mixing of James F. Reynolds from Too Cool for School could fix this. It's the first true cross into Western pop sound, which auto-tunes the artist into instruments instead of vocals with personality. It feels more novelty than music, just throwing whichever member wherever with no roles to fill. This has nothing to do with the content of the album, which is meant to be dark and evil, not dark and dance around. This track is overtuned to the point I could mistake it for album fodder, but it's actually the lead single. Such a small defeat over one track doesn't matter much, as the next solos could practically be 7 singles. Before getting into the solos, I'll go over the general structure of what they did here. Each track features a different outsider for production besides Rapman and Jin's later on, though this inclusion of outsiders is mediated by having each member in their own writing credits, with finally even the vocal line writing their own content. Besides Jungkook, who had RM write for him, but he knows RM is a genius. However, we'll find here that RM's writing is beginning to decline by committing his time to pop influence instead of hip-hop. We start with Jungkook's solo at track 3, titled Begin. This is the weakest solo track for me personally. Jungkook is speaking about his old detached nature and how he would avoid being personable with his friends, but RM and other members helped him open up more. The production is decent, but it doesn't feel like Jungkook's style, though I assume the members had some say in who they worked with. The outsider producing here is Tony Esterly, with practically no career beforehand except maybe on Satisfied in the Hamilton mixtape, which was mid. The vocals from Jungkook here are hollow against the production, and while the chorus might be decent, everything between them isn't worth it. Someone else could enjoy this track, but it's another loss in my opinion. Track 4 is Jimin's solo, titled Lie. And I will not lie, this is a hitter, with production that suits a ballet track far more than normal BTS, and Jimin sounds very comfortable by himself here. The outsider producer for this is named DARK&WILD, known for composing Lee Hee's Soulite, a stellar comeback album, as well as Epic High's We've Done Something Wonderful. Remember Sean from the I Need You remix? Same crew. Anyways, Bang and P-Dog helped for Jimin's writing, with another outsider named Sumin, who went on to imitate Rapman and girl group Stacy. Now they decimate the charts since 2020, but they still have yet to release a full album. Get on it, Stacy. Anyways, I could have seen Lie's production being a Dark&WILD bonus track, but Jimin is better here than in most of those songs, and I really think it's all thanks to DARK&WILD taking over for P-Dog. Well, Lie does fall for the same weak verses. The chorus in here makes it totally listenable, and maybe playlistable. I loved this at first, but grew out of it for other tracks because this isn't even the best yet. Track 5 is V's solo, titled Stigma, and this is the best yet. Maybe the best of all time to come out of BTS. This has blown me away from the day it released, and granted, I have a bias for V, this is the true first time his vocal skill shines as bright or even brighter than Jimin and Jin. I'm going to reel it back a bit and talk about the production. The only writers besides V are Slow Rabbit and Bang, with full production given to the legend himself, Filter, with a PH and a RE on the end. Remember, Filter is another member of the Planet Shiver trio. He was with DJ Freeze a few years before Freeze got on that Too Cool for School intro. After Filter, DJ Freeze and third member DH Style of Planet Shiver disbanded in 2011. While Freeze would stick around the hip-hop scene, Filter found a resurgence of work in K-pop as an arranger. This started in Akdong musician's debut album in 2014, then Junghyung's debut EP and album in 2015, all highly regarded as real pop by indie singer-songwriters. Then, the next year, he was arranging for Lee Hee Solite, Epic High's We've Done Something Wonderful, and you know how it goes. He's still getting a ton of roles arranging hit after hit, so expect to see Filter sticking around in the 2020s. Enough of production, we can talk about the song now. There's a ton of content from these verses, despite the groove he's boxed into, and although the production is a bit dark with light poppy synths and riffs, the lyrical content is much darker. The trumpet adds so much to the chorus, it comes from standard R&B to neo-soul, and the vocals find a new level of accentuation that wouldn't be possible on typical P-Dog production. This was another great match of a producer that allowed V to prove himself as instrumental to the vocal line, even more so than in Just One Day and Skool Luv Affair. Overall, best track on the album. I always come back to it. It's never bad. It's just sad. And I'm sad when it ends, really. Next is track 6, titled First Love, which is Suga's solo. You might expect his first love to be basketball, but he actually credits piano. If you remember from the pre-BTS history recaps, in one of Suga's interviews, he mentioned his favorite hobby was basketball, but his earliest form of escapism was through piano. If you're unaware, the MIDI programming hobby he also picked up is commonly done with a piano like this classic Key Studio, so you can see his pianist passion through his dedication there, even working for a recording studio. I own one of these things and can say I probably wouldn't even consider studio work, so Suga was serious about music, whereas basketball became a pastime instead of a career. First Love is a very personal piece of music that builds a lore rather than sounding good, but the production still has great chemistry with Suga. That reason is because he's on production and writing alone, except one other person, the outsider being Miss K. I'm going to assume she's a woman, and Miss K has brought some real history, so she's maybe not quite an outsider. Her earliest work I could find was in 2012, producing for 2AM, that early boy group JYP co-signed to Bang before BTS, so you could get some early management experience. At least that's what I think it was for. Miss K's next credit is merely keyboarding for Oh Are You Late Too, until being brought in for Wings out of nowhere for a full production. Never to be seen again. Did she die? Is it a ghost name? Who really knows? Leave a like, and I might pray for her. I don't think Suga could have made this track himself, so Miss K's involvement seems to be a good option, but this isn't an especially strong solo for me in terms of the mixing. I know Suga stans will swear by this track as his first opus, but I think Suga has already shown better performances than this, despite how personal these lyrics are. Moving on, we have Reflection, which is Rapman solo, where he's given the same treatment as Suga with writing and production, but instead of Miss K, we got Slow Rabbit. Thankfully, Slow Rabbit comes and proves he can ruin the concept of independent production for the artist by using the same synth pack as any other spacey BTS pop song. There is not much in production here that strikes as unique from Rapman, nor are the lyrics especially deep or personal, but it feels as though they've decided to make a solo album fodder, or Rapman is losing his touch. Though the verse content is slightly better and the production isn't unlistenable, this is the second to worst solo with no payoff from sticking around for the chorus. Next up is track 8 with J-Hope's solo titled Mama. This is a complete flip with the dark aspect of production coming from accordion, like MF Doom kinda, but it's overall lighthearted and fun. As we've seen from J-Hope's production style during the Dark&WILD intro, fun beats are where he feels most comfortable, and he certainly got one here. Though J-Hope stays out of production and P-Dog is back, we're also joined by an outsider. Arguably, this is the biggest name on the album, and I'm surprised it wasn't talked about more during release. The outsider's name is Primary, widely regarded as a top-name collaborator in Korean indie hip-hop around 2004, with a huge emphasis in jazz rap, my personal favorite genre. He became known between working with dynamic duo Engaryon, which led to Primary's debut as P-School in 2006 with a mixtape titled Daily Apartment, turning that into a collab album with Beanzino for his debut in 2009, birthing one of the best Korean jazz rappers on the scene. After this, Primary had solo releases around every 3 years, but nothing sold nearly as well as his Zion T collabs on Primary and the Messengers, his first full LP, released in 2012. Though these singles saw millions of sales, the album itself only received 27,000. I don't want to cover the history of Primary, not here at least, so let's get back to J-Hope's Mama. The sound itself came to be very reminiscent of a few songs on his solo debut mixtape, Hope World, from 2018, 2 years after this song. It's no surprise that P-Dog is included on those tracks as well as this one. While the lyric content may not be deep and sad, it provides a basis of J-Hope's drive to be an artist and what his Hope World would come to fruition as. The main goal is keeping it catchy and pleasant, which happens to appeal to pop audiences, but J-Hope is primarily bringing his own style, and there's huge chemistry with the production because of that personality. Well, in the last track, we heard Rapman making half reflections and mostly pessimistic observations. J-Hope's track brings us into his dreams for the future of music, as well as telling us how he feels about his mama. Very nice track overall, being my second favorite of the solos, and closely tied for second place with the next and final solo, being Jin's solo at track 9, titled Awake. The strings at the beginning set you up for the next 3 minutes. If you like it, you'll like it, and I am so biased for strings. This is a more classical arrangement and acts as a finality for the short film series. Being an important track, Bang knew he could not mess up on the crew, so he stuck to the tried and true Slow Rabbit for production. However, this is Slow Rabbit's other style we first found in Hwayang, where he doesn't try to make club bangers, but just a pop song. And he nails it here, thank God. The interesting part is the writing credits. This is a Jin solo, but joining him for writing are J-Hope, Rapman, P-Dog, Slow Rabbit, Hitman Bang, and a new face named June. Not really an outsider, as he was once a trainee under Big Hit, but joined Planetarium Records in 2018 and debuted with boy group PLT. His main experience is co-writing for BTS, as well as Saran and IU, both known as powerful pop artists. And I must say, Jin sounds phenomenal here as a powerful pop artist. Despite probably not writing much on his own, this song has Jin's solo range at peak performance, much like V's solo granted his peak. This is a grand outro to the short film series, and I could not imagine it sounding any other way. Definitely a classic that could have been a whole secondary single, but alas, we only have blood, sweat, and tears. After the solos, BTS immediately switches to fuck mode and turbo run it into the ground. You might not notice it, but this is where the evils of Outsider sprouts, where the few become many, and BTS is overrun in a moment's notice. They keep it cool here though, at track 10, titled Lost. After so many single solos, we bring the members back together, but Lost is now only the vocal line. You may feel they shine brighter in their roles because you just heard each member as a soloist and appreciated their individuality. The truth is, Lost only shows how interchangeable each member is, where each one could easily be swapped for another vocalist. This is what K-pop and ultimately BTS had become through virtue of westernizing their pop, but still keeping idol culture. While this is a certified solo P-Dog production, let's take a look at who's writing from the vocal line. We have P-Dog, Supreme Boy, June, RM, Peter Ibsen, Richard Rawson, and Lee Paul Williams. Zero vocalist writing, zero authenticity to the content. Skimming through the new names, Ibsen's main work is in teen pop with Billy Crawford, L5, and Jessie J, who I can all safely call garbage. Richard Rawson is a failed UK pop rapper known as Phaser of N-Dubs. They disbanded after dropping dumpster fire albums back to back to back annually starting in 2008, with no releases since, officially disbanding in 2012. Finally, we have Lee Paul Williams with close to no experience, but after Wings, he was hired as a composer for classic boy group Super Junior's 8th album and never hired again after. Why are these people on this track? Because they can write teen pop trash that sounds bad unless you're young and obsessed with portraying an image through music instead of your independent personality. And unfortunately, that is what the K-pop audience has become. So Lost is where the stans finally get what they want. Something they can relate to, but the artists are totally lost. It is not a bad song, but this is the sprout of evil, and we're coming up on the bloom. We find a short break in the next track, finally being BTS Cypher Part 4, with the rap line instead of vocals. The rap line is still writing for themselves, but something is missing from production. Oh, it's any sign of big hit, and instead we find 2 more saplings taking root with Supreme Boy nowhere to be found. These newcomers are Chris Tricky Stewart and Medor J. Pierre. Now, Tricky's career is much more impressive than most here. He was producing and writing as early as Pink's debut album in 2000, going on with Britney Spears and Beyonce, then hitting the big leagues with Justin Bieber's Baby and Frank Ocean's Novocaine. This was a great choice from Bang if he ever made one, to make sure it appealed to the teen audience, but also older fans. However, Tricky's co-producer, known as Pierre Maven Medor, has an ostensibly weaker track record. There is not much, but his most well-known work starred in 2006 with P. Diddy, an artist whose solo work is received so poorly he keeps renaming himself to avoid critics, like Davey Vanity, but was nevertheless executive producer on Biggie's Ready to Die. After Diddy, Tricky found jobs in 2012 between Usher, Flo Rida, Trey Songz, and Nelly. Not the Furtado kind, but she is featured on the outro track titled Headphones, which is very odd. These were all weak albums, but nothing that would kill a career except Nelly and maybe T.I., but T.I. had other problems. I digress, these are 2 producers commonly known for pop hits in the club. Is BTS Cypher Part 4 supposed to be a pop hit in the club? Why are these 2 people here instead of just giving production to Supreme Boy and Suga, who have proven their ability through the past 3 cycles? Why are these 2 people here instead of just giving production to Supreme Boy and Suga, who have proven their ability through the past 3 ciphers? Bang's obsession on bringing in outsiders have begun pushing BTS out of their own group. After the cypher is track 12, where we bring everyone back together, vocal and rap line. This is the cesspool of the album titled Am I Wrong? An attempt at country pop by mixing a 1994 song by Delta blues artist Keb Mo, or Kevin Moore, who has since won 5 Grammys. He's credited in production, but I doubt it's for more than that sample. Am I Wrong is a real club banger for them country brothers, so let's take a look into production. No P-Dog, no Slow Rabbit. James F. Reynolds, previously hired for the terrible mixing in Too Cool for School, now joins as producer. Sam Klempner, previously only hired as guitarist for Skool Luv Affair, joins as producer. And Josh Wilkinson, writer for 5 Seconds of Summer's self-titled debut and Green Day's Revolution Radio, unfortunately joins as producer. If I were Hitman Bang throwing money at my board of directors and trusting them to pick a decent staff for an album, I would have dissolved the board after seeing this shit show of personnel. And that's only the producers for this track, so let's see the writers. We're bringing the whole BTS lineup back together after their solos, which they've written, so they're bound to have some writing credits. For writing only, we have Supreme Boy, who is missing from the cypher for some reason, joined by Rapman, P-Dog, Gecko, and Adora. It seems as though the vocal line is left again to P-Dog, with outsiders to help make it poppy. I'm no stranger to Gecko, as he's a member of Dynamic Duo and founder of Amoeba Culture, where many indie artists began, such as Primary from J-Hope's Mama. Geico prefers to collab on singles rather than make albums, but most of his tracks are pretty decent, with his career in K-pop now reaching a decade long. The other writer is named Adora, a trainee who was meant to debut with girl group The Ark, but didn't, ending up with a recruitment to BTS in 2016 for in-house production as their only female producer, an offer that would never be extended to Suga, of course. However, in 2021, she left Big Hit for the label Aura Entertainment and has since made her solo debut as a singer-songwriter. What do you get when you combine a decently skilled writing team with incompetent producers? That's what the formula for BTS became, and while it sold copies for the album and became mass appeal, the crucial part for Western audiences was K-pop being something new and not pandering to a demographic in the United States, but one across the world in a totally different culture. When K-pop began to take on aspects of Western pop, it ironically alienated the Western audience who was trying to escape that sound, and instead led them away from BTS to more indie artists. This was Bang's mismanagement in full play, where he threw his golden goose egg into the pile, indiscernible from the heaps that already lay as a vast ocean. A vast ocean of mediocrity and ingenuousness, as if BTS had never grown since their conception. Instead of displaying the lessons of their past albums and following their dreams to crush standards, the only one here still dedicated to writing is Rapmon, with others locked in bubbles away from music in favor of hired talent. It's as if BTS were never trainees for a reason, because Bang could just outsource the labor to make it easier for his crew. If you thought this was their worst moment, don't worry, the Love Yourself series is coming up next. Never speaking of track 12 again, we can move on to 13, titled 21st Century Girl. Thank God it's a P-Dog solo production, with Bang, Supreme Boy, and Rapmon in the writing. No outsiders, nothing weird, but unfortunately, the sound is just as bad as the previous track. After listening to the outsider styles, P-Dog's firmware has been corrupted, and he tends to spew out teen pop beats every once in a while. P-Dog's skill before this album was pretty good and improving, but this is where his improvement ends. You could have thrown Slow Rabbit on here, but I don't think there was any saving this track. However, in the next track, titled 2-3 Still Wishing for Better Days, they throw in the Slow Rabbit production with P-Dog. The rap line is all writing, Bang is in there with them, and it's the closest we're getting to a full cast BTS track compared to their previous songs. This isn't nearly as bad as tracks 12 or 13, and might even be enjoyable if it weren't one of the longest tracks on here at 4.5 minutes, only beaten by the cyphers nearly 5 minutes. The rappers sound like they haven't changed since Skool Luv Affair, which is a bad sign coming from the end of Hwayang. Speaking of the end, we finally reach the outro, which is technically an interlude on the first edition of Wings, but extended by a full minute in the real outro version, only available in the Wings reissue titled You Never Walk Alone. This is the first time we see BTS as full idol pop stars, not of their own volition, but that of mass media's expectations of K-pop idol stars. The boys are practically dolls at this point, and we see them refocusing on the pop sound they attempted to recapture from Oh Are You Late Too. In track 15, we hear Spring Day, which should have been bonus content on the Oh Are You Late Too reissue. At least that's where the sound is at. The difference now is BTS has a huge teen pop fan base, and like bottom feeders, they will eat any garbage as long as it has a BTS label on it. With zero individuality, this production style doesn't work for BTS. There's outsiders writing for the members, and it even sounds like a reused beat from Big Hit's second boy band titled Tomorrow X Together, or TXT, who debuted in 2019. TXT allowed Big Hit to invade the teen pop audience much easier than BTS, because that's what TXT was made to be. BTS was made to be an underground hip-hop group, which caused audience infighting during their transition to idol pop. But if you start in idol pop like TXT, the fans can never be mad, because they deliberately sought out pop shit and consumed it from the very start. Nevertheless, BTS still sounds like real K-pop idols with this single, so you know they won awards and broke records, all the popular stuff. Track 16 is titled Not Today, which is another callback to Oh Are You Late Too's lead single, N.O. However, the stan audience loved this one for making them feel empowered, instead of the reception from No being, wow, what a weak song that says nothing, while being full out cringe. The fans have lost their standards of music and merely latch on to whatever single comes out of BTS until the next one drops. At least they're embracing their youthful mistakes, which, again, is the total antithesis of Hwayang, where you separate and grow from your mistakes so you don't do them again. Next is the outro, where every member is totally drowned out by the instrumental trying to be a club hit, even in the outro. I'll remind you all, these productions on the issue are all from P-Dog, so I can almost imagine him, to quote Whiplash, deliberately sabotaging the band from the inside out in favor of a longer career as TXT's producer. Regardless, I don't know why BTS is aiming so hard for this teen dance pop audience. I would say the original Wings interlude is better since it's about a minute shorter. Finally, we have the second outro at track 18 titled A Supplementary Story You Never Walk Alone. This is a much more fitting outro for Wings because although it has P-Dog's awful touch on production, it keeps a traditional BTS style of pop and at least includes every member equally. Though the bass is still into club, it's at least better than the Club Banger 9000s P-Dog has been trying to make. On my first listen, and through many years, I held Wings at a 9 out of 10 for what it attempted to be, and I ignored the seeds that took root of the group. They attempted to give each member a solo, which was an unrivaled freedom among major labels at the time, who were afraid of their artists even attempting solo careers. Big Hit put full faith in these solos, essentially throwing each member to the wolves and seeing what survives. After the solos, the group was completely broken, told to just sing and look pretty while Bang's new staff handled the rest. I should guess these things happen at newer labels, but BTS has found worldwide chart success at this point, so you'd think Bang could hire people who aren't producing 4 out of 10 pop albums. In retrospect, I'm giving Wings a 5 out of 10, because although some of the best tracks are found here, this was enough to bring on the end times. Nearly a year later, in September 2017, begins the Love Yourself series with Tear, which would ultimately be their downfall. With ending the Hwayang days of continuing their schoolboy concept, BTS no longer had a concept. Instead, they chose to exist in the present while basking in the glory they've earned as K-pop idols. Though they may have faced hardships, it is the material success from music sales that gives them the strength to love themselves. So they preach the word of love yourself to their audience with no further concept. This means they can focus on doing what sounds good instead of following a coherent story like true pop stars. Let's dive into the sound. The intro starts off with Singularity. Instead of the rap line, this is V's solo intro. The sound is completely derivative of Stigma on Wings with few deviations. It's written by Rapman, and the outsider producer is Charlie J. Perry, whose only prior experience is production for a failed UK hip-hop group, Linguistics. By all means, this should have been a garbage song. However, this production ends up outclassing Stigma by a small bit, which makes this intro my overall favorite from BTS and the best song on this EP. Track 2 is titled Fake Love, which is only a bit better than Blood, Sweat, Tears, particularly because I'm not a fan of the tropical sound. The producer is P-Dog, with the only writers being Rapman and Bang. Looks like they're scaling back. However, the song's actual structure remains the same, and this is still a weak single. Still overproduced, focused on auto-tuning notes over authentic vocals, which leaves the overall content empty unless you're in the sad club banger audience, and again, you don't want to cry in the club. Somehow, the singles have become album fodder. Track 3 is titled The Truth Untold, which is performed by The Vocal Line, but totally produced by Steve Aoki. In case you haven't heard of him, Steve Aoki is one of the worst bro-step electro house producers of our generation, and hasn't stopped releasing Waste of Time since his debut in 2012. This track is no different, and I won't waste time berating the sound. For writing on here, we still have Rapman and Slow Rabbit, but 4 additional outsiders join for writing. We'll run through them quickly as there's about 20 more for this album. Ronald Spreckley, no prior credits and now writes for TXT and Monsta X. Jake Torrey, one prior credit of Lupe Fiasco's Wild Child, now writes for TXT and Monsta X, as well as major industry artists like Justin Bieber since 2020. Noah Conrad, no prior credits, now writes for TXT and Monsta X and NCT. Finally is Anika Wells, with one experience 1 year prior writing for melodic dubstep artist Illenium, and after this album was included for the final track of KDA's debut EP, also featuring the group twice. From all of this, my point is that BTS is no longer BTS, but has become the industry and indistinguishable by ignoring members for hired writers who are mediocre at best. Track 4 is titled 134340 and produced by P-Dog with the rap line writing, but they're ultimately canceled out by outsiders. Bobby Chung, no prior experience, still writing for BTS and TXT. Martin Luke Brown, with prior experience, failing as an indie pop singer and never coming back. Finally, Orla Gartland, with no prior experience and making a stellar solo debut from Ireland in 2021 with indie pop album Woman on the Internet, heavily inspired by Regina Spektor and Imogen Heap, but she never came back to BTS. Good for her. Track 5, titled Paradise, is produced by Lo-File, whose only experience is one song with Chun on their weakest album, Homie. After this, he went off and made his own wonky future bass, and it's not that good. Joining the rap line for writing on this, we have Mnek, or MNEK, known as a dance pop artist from the UK, and beginning writing for Madonna and Beyonce in 2015. Now, he writes and composes for artists such as Twice, Selena Gomez, and Little Mix. Also joining for writing is Song Jae-hyung, also known as Nine from Korean indie rock group Nine and the Numbers, and they have some hits, however they are not BTS, they're a rock band. Track 6, titled Love Maze, is produced by P-Dog and Rapline writers, but again a whole new slew of outsiders, with a few repeats being Adora from Aura and Bobby Chung. The new writers are Candice Nicole Sosa, a nobody who claims to be from my state of Michigan while being based in LA, at least according to her unprofessional website. No experience but BTS songs, which started here and spread to TXT to stay. Joining her is Yoon Kita, which is also nobody, and I can't find any record of them, unless they're a writer from Gackt's Mars album, in which case, what a banger, thank you. The final outsider to join, and the true fall of BTS, is DJ Swivel from the Chainsmokers. Instead of imitating his sound, they decided to just hire him and let P-Dog take a break. He actually reappears for the next track, and the second to last before the outro, so by this point you could fall asleep and wake up when the album is over. Nothing really changes in terms of the formula until then, so let's check out the intro. Oh sweet, Gokskim is producing the outro. It's actually decent, with the only outsider being Shin Myung-soo, and I can't find any credits for him. The sound is better than most other tracks on this album, which was a bummer when I found out, because I would have to constantly reverse one track after putting the CD in my car, and it really scratched up over time, like Thug Life's Volume 1. But Love Yourself, Tear, is rotten in the middle compared to that gold. Beginning with this album, I lost the ability to resonate with what BTS said because they no longer said anything. They're just pop stars, being pop stars and trying to get on the radio. Overall, this album was a 3 out of 10 because I still like the intro and outro, but the substance is grosser than mold. Believe it or not, the next album in the series, titled Love Yourself Her, follows nearly the same formula 8 months later. Let's run it. Jimin kills his solo intro, Serendipity, just like V's Singularity. Not as good, but still top contender for top intros. This is supposed to bait you into the rest of the album thinking it's good because the intro was good. This is Slow Rabbit's production at its peak. However, in writing, we see Rapmon joined by the nobodies Ray Michael John Jr. and Ashton Foster, who both wrote for Save Me, and they both return here. Though this isn't their worst work, that'll come 2 tracks later. DNA is just as bad as Blood, Sweat, Tears. Actually, it's a bit worse. This is the last time I had hope for a BTS single, and I began outright ignoring their promotions afterwards. Not even Supreme Boy could save the writing from Cass's influence. And Cass has no experience, but she's getting some now with idol girl group ITZY. Yeah. Best of Me is the track 3 fodder we've come to know and love, with P-Dog's production being joined by Andrew Taggart. He's been with the Chainsmokers since 2012, so practically their entire career. The Nobodies are back joining the rap line, as well as Adora and Sam Klempner, that guitarist from Skool Luv Affair, who was brought back for Am I Wrong? Being a Chainsmokers song, we can safely ignore this and move on. Track 4 is Dimple, produced by two outsiders, Matthew Tischler and Crash Cove. Crash Cove is a failed pop rock artist with no prior credits, but Matthew Tischler has a ton of credits. With the Disney Channel. Think Shake It Up and Austin and Ally. Tischler also has other show credits like Degrassi and Pretty Little Liars, but started writing for K-pop around 2015. Now he works extensively with JoJo Siwa, Taeyeon, and Stray Kids. That's just production, but the writing team is nearly as small, with Tischler joined by Rapmon and new challenger Allison Kaplan, who should have taken on production here with their first credit composing for girl group FX's comeback album Red Light in 2014, which is when I found them. Allison's future golden credits are with outstanding 2019 albums from Taeyeon and Red Velvet, but this BTS feature solidified her popularity to get to that point, and she may have been the only one who actually deserved it. Skipping the rest from Senile P-Dog, the outro is here, titled Outro Her, is produced between Slow Rabbit and Suga. Despite P-Dog growing incapable of production, Slow Rabbit is in his prime, and Suga is beginning to produce just a crumb of track. The writing here is rapline and rapline only, and it's another top-tier outro. Another track where I have to skip backwards in my car and scratch the disc, because there's no way I'm listening to the middle of this. BTS can still make great music, and they prove it with the stripped-back intros and outros, but Bang feels the need to hire so many people that BTS has become the pop industry, ditching the members for the money. Overall, I rated this album a 4 out of 10, being a little bit more bearable than Love Yourself Tear. However, this album gained BTS more popularity than ever, selling nearly 3 million copies per issue compared to the 1 million of Hwayang Yeonghwa. Bang saw this is what the people wanted, and this is what gave him success. The next release is the compilation, just like Young Forever, but titled Love Yourself Answer. I'm not spending any more time on the series because Love Yourself Answer only includes trivia tracks and Idol, mostly produced by P-Dog. DJ Swivel is on most of the trivia track solos, but Rapmon's solo, titled Love, is only him and Slow Rabbit, so that one is alright. I'm Fine, the other new track before Idol, includes 8 outsiders for writing, including the Nobodies clan, who are now gaining numbers in the walls. By Love Yourself Answer, BTS was already ruined, and this was their final nail in the coffin. Idol was their first single I despised, and the only one I still recall hearing in public on the radio. From my workplace staples to grocery stores to my local ice cream place's putt-putt course, I would hear Idol with my past idols sounding like wind-up monkeys on autotune. The group I once held with such high regard for their authenticity had finally reached the worldwide mainstream, and the only song I would hear from this group with such an outstanding prior catalog was the electropop club banger album fodder I wholly resented. This was the shining example of BTS that put them on to Big Bang Gangnam Style levels of popularity, and I was mortified at what pop had become, or rather what it had done to my role models from high school. Everyone and their mothers in the USA now views BTS as some kind of crazy monkey where it's appealing to young people, but their prior audience somehow outgrew their music despite aging alongside the members. It's feasible because on every radio single they're putting out now, the gimmick seems to be sound like Crazy Monkey, instead of make K-pop that stands apart from major labels because the artists have independent stories and we shouldn't think of our members as anything less than humans like us. It's almost as if these writers exist on the moon with zero worry of the streets they were raised. Instead, they buy their way into success and fame after failing countless times because you can bet radio listeners will love you if your hit single gets enough airtime. All that matters to them is how often it repeats, and they'll say, "Hey, I know that song. That's BTS. They're the crazy monkey guys," right? Before Wings, the label was much more relaxed on portraying a certain image instead of #1 worldwide idol poppers. Big Hit trusted the members to write between themselves for the most part. BTS began as very personal and growth-oriented, with their album bangers being largely owed to how raw the content was. At Love Yourself, BTS no longer made music of what they saw, like in Hwayang or Schoolboy, but started focusing on what they wanted, which is caving to the desires they worked to break away from. They wanted nothing more than commercial success around the world and stripped the agency from each member in favor of the teen pop writer failures. They're not even good. They could have at least been good, but it feels as if they were only chosen for speaking English. It's worth noting that most producers have writing credits, and P-Dog is most producers, so he could have played a role in restricting the vocal line. I cannot believe none of the BTS members have attempted leaving, especially with Suga being diehard against idol culture from the very start. The rap line may fight, but it feels as though the vocal line never cared as much, and they would have been fine with starting as idols anyways. I hate Idol. So, for 8 months later, Big Hit is in their boardroom thinking, wow, it's been about 8 months, so the fans are probably expecting a new album to consume this year. And some guy from the corner says, well, we just finished our last epic series of Love Yourself, so what do we do now? And someone else in the other corner says, did you say epic? Like Epic High? Those guys are real K-pop classics. What if we did something like those guys? And then Doc Skim, Sean, and Filter bust through the window after wrapping up their composition and writing for Epic High's album that year, and all of them speak in unison, saying, I was a huge Epic High fan back in Map the Soul days. And Big Guy Bung says, perfect. We'll call our next series Map of the Soul. It'll be sure to sell big, especially to the huge older demographic we just lost. And before he dismisses them to work on it, Bang adds, wait, don't forget to not include Epic High on any track, no matter how much it would personally mean to our rap line. Just get their crew, not the real Epic High members. But please, find someone to feature from the radio. We need more radio pop hits. Please give me radio pop hits. So, the boardroom left, and Big Hit made Map of the Soul Persona. With this cool new series, BTS was destined to make the best K-pop record of all time. Just like before, they start out small, releasing an EP where every diehard fan is going to pre-order it, and then they release the actual album with all the songs where they get even more sales. They're just trying to double charge people with reissues. It's common sense between scummy K-pop labels. To not waste time, we're only focusing on the full collection titled Map of the Soul 7. Actually, let's stick to Persona, because I'm not even getting through this full thing. The intro, titled Persona, is decent, having retraced production all the way back to Skool Luv Affair's intro for the beat. They knew guitars were the way to hits, and their current producers couldn't fathom what a guitar is supposed to mix like, so they just used the old stuff from Dawsey the Legend. Rapmon is still killing it with pop rap, and it's an overall decent intro, maintaining the feel of one of those full-length versions we got in Young Forever. The lead single again calls back to Skool Luv Affair's single Boy in Love, but this one on Persona is titled Boy with Love. Instead of pop hitter Steve Aoki, we get someone who will really put you on radio named Halsey. If you had a Halsey feature on your single, you were guaranteed to dominate ears from high school hallways to any pocket holding a vertical ID. This was proven by the Chainsmokers fad, which would have never become as big if not for Halsey and Closer, where she somehow captivated the female audience. Regardless, I was glad to hear this instead of Idol on the radio, but it still left me feeling I was listening to the corpses of BTS being puppeteered behind a microphone, like that new Michael Jackson album. The members are purely here for novelty and offer nothing unique. Halsey didn't destroy the track. BTS was already a graveyard, and she's just passing through. She's not even featured in the writing, but there's a new 4 people. Track 3 is Mikrokosmos, where the hardest thing is trying to say the title until you realize it's just Microcosmos. Nothing more fodder than this, produced by the outsider Arcades, who basically takes over for P-Dog on this album, and featuring 10 outsiders for writing, including DJ Swivel. Track 4 is Make It Right, with Fred Gibson on production and Ed Sheeran in lead writing. Track 5, Home, has P-Dog back producing and 6 brand new outsiders in writing. This album is everything pop should never become and does a huge disservice to authentic artists in the genre. They try to take this claim of Map the Soul from Epic High and bait the audience into a rap focus, then deliberately fill the album front to back with pure electropop radio bait that sounds nothing like BTS. I'm sorry for anyone who's still a fan of BTS after this album, and my final rating is a 2 out of 10. I would go over Map the Soul 7, but I can sum it up in one short sentence. There is zero chemistry between the members. It seems as though they would be better suited for solo careers at this point, because if they want to stay in BTS, they're going to have to deal with the other 10 writers on the track competing for credits. BTS completely already lost their basis after the school days ended, and just like any pop star, they've fallen to corporate intervention, with the financial sector attempting to monetize them in the most exploitative way possible against their fans' wallets. No longer music for the people, BTS is only an idea about what music should be, which is solving your issues with foolish pride and money. They've been brought to a silhouette of the artists they started as. 4 months before this album, Bang decided BTS wouldn't meet his radio standards, so he launched TXT to take on electropop for the new hip youth, so maybe Bang will let BTS make music for older people now in the future, but I'm still waiting on that. I won't bother even touching B, because you can guess how it goes. Not to mention, they've just reported their next album as another compilation, which has actually already come out, and it's not the worst. It's not as good as Young Forever for sure, but it has a few. Run is on there. That's fine. Run's on there. They got it. The fall has already happened, and BTS will only continue to spiral further into obscurity. Many idol groups don't last because when the eldest member turns 28 due to Korea's mandatory military service, they're forced to serve for 18 months. When all the members have their ages in a ladder, this leads to many absences for shows and maybe none at all. Thanks to recent court decisions, pop stars may defer their service until they're 30. However, Jin and Suga are both turning 30 in December 2022 and March 2023 respectively. So, this could be the end. Though, with all members aged between 23 and 30 now, BTS could technically enlist at the same time like the group ONF did, unless any of the younger members have solo plans. I believe with their popularity now, each BTS member could easily come back to a solo career within 2 years, and maybe even come back as adults like Sotaiji or actors when they begin to reach 40. Regardless, BTS has secured their retirements with copious cash grabbing, and TXT is doing commercially comparable due to promotion from BTS members and using the exact same production team. So, Hitman Bang still has a way to play the radio game for a few more years, and BTS is on their merry way of living lives among the rich and famous by their mid-20s, early 30s. Still, I will forever resent Big Hit for what they made BTS represent. I feel as though Wings was really a pinnacle in terms of what genre-breaking K-pop was capable of, but once it was clear BTS could be radio pop stars, Big Hit stopped at nothing to make it a reality. And I have no doubt the members would have agreed with mass appeal because they want to be popular too. The problem is the culture surrounding radio music has degraded over time. It used to be about the music, but around the 2000s or 2010s, it started becoming more about the people behind the music. No matter what they were saying, as long as it was a recognizable artist on the mic, they would guarantee listeners no matter how bad it really was. Think of Snoop Dogg and how much whack stuff he puts out, like NFTs and Snoop Line albums, but because he's popular and he's Snoop Dogg, he gets away with it because he sounds like Snoop Dogg doing it. That is what we call novelty music, and is eventually what BTS would succumb to. BTS constantly pushed to make their music more and more Western, to appeal to United States radio without truly understanding what made hits on Western radio. It's not about the music, it's about the popularity of the people. Not a single person listening to radio pop is doing so for the lyrics. CL attempted a United States debut on radio with Diplo producing, and despite being known as a queen in Korea, she was nothing to an American audience because they didn't know her. Once BTS had a modicum of radio play in America, Big Hit started throwing so much money into radio play, it became the only focus of BTS production, and corrupted P-Dog's brain with a worm virus. This move blew a gaping hole in the integrity of BTS. K-pop is a different audience from Western pop in that K-pop is meant to cause investment in the members themselves through the things they say in songs as character development, rather than wearing designer clothes to show how much money your music makes, and that's the extent of your interaction with the public. It's an entirely different scene, and trying to carry both trophies at once and mic drop is ultimately what crushed BTS, making their place both too simple and too complicated to gain mass appeal from either West or Eastern audiences. The genre of K-pop has moved on without BTS. However, there will always be classic sasaengs who cling to the group and swear by them. For me personally, I would have to be deluded to continue enjoying their releases, and I cannot imagine anyone becoming a fan during or after Love Yourself. There's tons of better music out there, from small label indie artists with deep histories, no deep ties to corporate greed through a CEO stock acquisitions. All it takes is turning off your radio and scrolling through Bandcamp or something. You get the point. Regardless of how many decades ago it was released, just because it's not current or appealing to radio doesn't mean it's not fire, and you might find some old classics you really love. For a final comparison, we'll make this short. At BTS's debut, all writing is done within the rap line, with small input from core producers and Supreme Boy, who by all means could have debuted as a member. Rapmon is solo writing for On the Start Line, and each member is credited on Circle Room Cypher, meaning they did write their own parts. Now, let's skip forward to what is supposedly a callback to Too Cool for School, which is track 18 on Map of the Soul 7, titled We Are Bulletproof, The Eternal. They are bolstering 17 writers with not a single member of BTS credited, and 2 random producers with no credits but side crewing radio pop hits like Machine Gun Kelly. The Love Yourself series is the first time BTS released under Columbia as a label, and they've continued with them all through Butter. With Columbia, we see over 120 people listed as album personnel, with every single aspect resting on a single mastering engineer to put it together. He is the other half of James F. Reynolds on Too Cool for School's mixing, and his name is Chris Geringer. He also brings James F. Reynolds in to help for this album. Thanks, Chris. Chris has an enormous catalog of experience, with more than half of his 650 roles coming after 2013, and he's been working with Sterling Sound ever since 2000. However, his prior experience is no laughing matter. 88 was EPMD's Strictly Business. 91, he mastered Main Source's Breaking Atoms. Same year was Naughty by Nature's self-titled debut, which ended up holding one of the first Grammy-nominated hip-hop singles. Geringer was behind the sound of rap's beginning to mass appeal by making it more pop-friendly and thus radio-friendly. He started coming up everywhere, from Wu-Tang's 36 Chambers, 6 Feet Deep by Gravediggaz, Stress by Organized Confusion, Word Life by OC, Phrenology by The Roots, and will land on Pretty Tony by Ghostface in 2004. Around this time, Chris Geringer got tired of hip-hop and wanted some pop tunes. So he started hanging out with Missy Elliott and found himself in Rihanna's debut flop of an album. Though for the next 2 years, he found great success between Nelly Furtado's Loose and Lupe Fiasco's Food and Liquor, 2006 was all fine and dandy for Geringer, except for one album from pop rapper Kevin Federline, also known as K-Fed. When K-Fed dropped his album, Playing with Fire, the world stopped, and each person older than 40 turned to the sun to pray for K-Fed's career to be cast into the fire. But it was not done, for his career was already cast in the fire. Playing with Fire is one of the worst pop rap albums in history. So bad that his wife, Britney Spears, left him the very next year. Pretty bad, but this didn't bring Geringer down, and he came back for Rihanna's true breakout album, Good Girl Gone Bad, with that one Umbrella song. Chris had a few other hits with Pharoah Monch's Desire, more Lupe, Talib Kweli, lots of Nas, POS Never Better. He was really killing it. But in 2010, Chris hit his head or something, and a beast awakened deep inside him on the darkest night. He decided he would make radio pop bangers and totally sell out in one of the most horrifying shifts of modern music. 2010 saw Chris Geringer mastering for Kesha's Animal, 303's Streets of Gold, and Nicki Minaj's Pink Friday, all radio hits, all radio shit. 2011 saw Deeper Wounds with Wiz Khalifa's Rolling Papers, Jason Derulo's Future Story, Kelly Clarkson's Stronger, and even Mac Miller nearly suffering the same fate as K-Fed with Blue Slide Park, but it wasn't that bad. 2012 wasn't too bad for Chris's pop game either, with Marina and the Diamonds' Electra Heart and Purity Ring's debut album, but Geringer was still shooting bullets in the careers of pop rappers, mainly being Tyga, Wiz Khalifa, and T.I. Poor T.I. 2013 had Geringer right back into hits with Mac Miller's Movies with the Sound Off and Kanye's Yeezus, though if I recall when these releases hit, the main issue from the audience was the mastering, but we'll leave that alone for now. Now was the time of true turbo flops. Selena Gomez's debut album Stars Dance, Robin Thicke's Blurred Lines, Katy Perry's Prism, the Roar album, Demi Lovato's Demi, Kid Cudi's Indicud, and don't forget Snoop Dogg's rebrand to Snoop Lion for the tragic release of Reincarnated. After this year, Geringer became the go-to guy for radio pop, and most of what you'll hear is influenced by his direction in one way or another. To give you an idea of his influence since 2015 to what he's doing now, I'll list off the people he's mastering radio singles for. We have The Chainsmokers, Machine Gun Kelly, Harry Styles, Dua Lipa, Sia, Muse, 21 Pilots, Lana Del Rey, Lizzo, Carly Rae Jepsen, Glass Animals, Stray Kids, Lil Nas X Montero, all the way up to BTS Butter. Beginning as a prodigy of hip-hop mastering, Geringer had no idea what his career would become today, nor the irreparable damage he would facilitate along the way. Be it bangers or flops, his direction has contributed widely to the commercialization of pop everywhere, turning what was once a genre split from folk into club bangers all the time. Thank you, Chris Geringer, for your devotion to music, despite higher-ups from Sterling Sound making you master these garbage albums for the sake of sales. Getting away from this, you might recall Skool Luv Affair's Magic Man on mastering, Tony Dawsey. Through all of these albums since then, Dawsey is nowhere to be found, rarely finding work. When it is, he's with Machine Gun Kelly's Rap Devil or Jay Electronica's A Written Testimony. I like to think if he was brought back instead of Sterling Sound, maybe there would have been a chance, but the point is, BTS was forced away from their mother goose of die-hard producers who tried to maintain the gloss of their golden egg BTS. For years, they'd never let BTS outside the nest, and it gave them a strong bond with each other. However, Big Hit decides to introduce new foster parent geese every 8 months who throw the egg around and play with it, wearing off the gloss quickly and becoming just another ball of gold. The geese are told to do something unique with the egg with no further instruction, and they do their thing so long as they're paid for it. In this, the blame doesn't lie on the sets of parents coming in and out collecting checks from throwing eggs around. The blame lies on the system in place which allows them to do so and continues allowing them. The parents see this as a means to live and work, making earnings for their temporary labor. The chemistry between them and the egg is negligible compared to the core producers who raise them and know how to care for them. But Big Hit says they want new producers and guaranteed radio hits, and any other opinions are thrown aside. The true issue lies with those who throw money at laborers, thinking their price tags mean better quality of work instead of relying on the previous experienced babysitters. All before Young Forever in 2016, BTS only released between 3 labels: Big Hit for production, Loan for distribution, and Pony Canyon for Japan distribution. This only switched in 2017 with Pony Canyon dropped for Universal, and again in 2018 where the full lineup for Love Yourself became Big Hit, iRiver, Columbia, and Virgin with Def Jam for Japan. Being the final nail in the coffin, this looks like classic mismanagement from a CEO who thought he had to change something up to boom in popularity. Bang had a good deal from Universal, but even more from Columbia. Ultimately, Bang got his wish for riches and fame, throwing his golden egg into an ocean of so many others piled up by Columbia. At first, it shined brighter than many others because it was isolated, but BTS dulled over time as the gloss wore away, and they assimilated to radio appeal like mixing grains of sand. Many others are running the pop game just like BTS today, but what made BTS great was their individuality and willingness to speak out against predatory practice. 7 members capable of doing their own thing on a microphone and doing it well. After the new label deals, more and more studio personnel flooded in, taking over for the members and pushing out core production, except for P-Dog, who just went senile. As long as BTS could show up to a stage and sell out stadiums, their studio time was neglected further and further, until they were disconnected from the writing and production process entirely. After Map the Soul 7, with the release of B, album sales would decline for the first time in BTS history. 20% in Korea, 75% in the US, yet a 15% growth in Japan, which I doubt is true unless Def Jam has big game over there. This 75% loss in the US is preceded by a 16 times increase from Wings to Love Yourself, and with this loss, BTS is now below that huge increase by 20%. They're demonstrably falling in popularity, and ultimately, the blame lies on Big Hit's management, making trade deals with corporations who wanted nothing more than to suck every won possible from BTS and their fans. Once standing as a paragon of artist rights against major labels who would always push artists too far, Big Hit now stands among them. And it would have never been possible without their golden egg, BTS. This video is not sponsored. It has taken me 2, 3, 4 months to write this entire thing, but I feel solid enough to end it here. I was going to have an in-depth section for the mixing crews between albums, like Chris Geringer at the end here, but that's just a huge time sink for another couple hours or something, so maybe in the future. I am planning on starting this channel back up with maybe some gaming or album reviews or maybe even K-pop reviews, but I'm not sure about the direction. If you want to voice any suggestions for videos, I will read the comments here and take it into consideration. Also, don't forget to subscribe or like the video, whichever you prefer, and hopefully I will see you all again soon. Women out.